At around 4 p.m. on Friday, April 15, 2011, in Lorgues, France, 27-year-old Alexander Durand was on his way home when he received a call from his younger sister, Séverine. She was a high school student, and the siblings had a close relationship, often calling each other. However, today she called not to share good news or weekend plans. Instead, she informed him that their mother, Colette, had not picked her up after school as she usually did. The day before, Séverine had been with their father, who had taken her to school in the morning. She had tried calling their mother multiple times, but her calls went unanswered. This was unusual because their mother was normally very responsible, and there was no reason for her not to come and pick up her daughter. Séverine was worried that something might have happened, such as an accident. She advised Alexander to check the situation and visit their mother's house. Alexander was also worried, so he called his mother several times, but received no response. Finally, he decided to visit his mother's house himself. When Alexander arrived, Séverine was already there, but she was still very anxious, even more than before. She was in the house with the gendarmes, and what they discovered was very concerning. Colette's car was parked in the driveway, the doors were unlocked, and the keys were in the ignition. 52-year-old Colette had vanished without a trace. The keys to the house were also in the car, so Alexander took them and went inside to see what was happening. The house was completely empty, as if she had simply disappeared. The gendarmes quickly began their search for Colette since the situation was becoming increasingly alarming. Initially, they suspected a robbery, but they found that nothing was stolen from the house. The doors and windows were untouched. In the back seat of the car, they discovered Colette's purse, which held all her identification, bank cards, and cash. She could not have left willingly without those items. Tension heightened. Even after 3 hours of searching, there was still no news. Both the house and the car were thoroughly examined, but no leads emerged. As a result, the search area was expanded to include the outskirts of the town. None of the neighbors had seen anything out of the ordinary, no suspicious noises or activity near Colette's home. To learn more about her, the police interviewed her relatives. Colette, a divorced mother of 4, was known for her reserved and calm demeanor. She was not someone who would spontaneously disappear. She had no mental health issues or addictions. At the time, Colette was working as a supermarket manager. She was polite, punctual, and a devoted mother. Everyone who knew her was confused and did not understand what had happened, as she had no troubling relationships and no history of violence. The evidence suggested that Colette's disappearance was not accidental. The police believed that whoever was involved in this incident was someone she was very familiar with. At the very least, Colette had allowed this person into her house or had given them the right to enter. After investigating, the police identified the primary suspect. She lived by herself in a small 2-story house. To save on expenses, she rented the first floor to a man named Bernard. During his interview, Bernard made some strange and unsettling remarks. He speculated on how Colette might have been abducted, suggesting that she could have been struck on the back of the head, rendering her unable to call for help. He also provided a detailed account of her medical condition, noting that she was diabetic and needed urgent assistance to avoid serious health consequences. His level of knowledge about Colette raised suspicions among the police. Furthermore, Colette's son, Alexander, revealed that Bernard was in love with his mother, which could explain his insight into her behavior and routines. This revelation increased suspicions, as Bernard could potentially have a motive. Alexander noted that, despite Bernard's interest, his mother did not reciprocate and had no intention of developing anything beyond friendship. She was solely focused on her children and her work, completely dismissing the idea of a romantic relationship with Bernard. When detectives investigated Bernard's background, they found that he had a criminal history. In 1999, he assaulted his girlfriend with a weapon after she tried to end their relationship. His ex described him as very hot-tempered and unable to control his rage. As a result of these incidents, suspicions about Bernard increased. Colette's lack of interest may have caused him to become angry, and what happened next remains unclear. In 1999, Bernard received a brief 6-year prison sentence for an attack, mainly because the girl he attacked survived. Now, he was called to the police station for questioning as the primary suspect in Colette's disappearance. The police were trying to determine when Colette went missing, and Bernard claimed to have useful information. He reported that on the afternoon of April 14, 2011, while watching television, he heard noises coming from the second floor, where Colette had lived. He could hear footsteps on the wooden floor, but then everything went quiet. He did not see Colette leave, making it likely that he was the last person to have seen her. However, the police were concerned about Bernard's behavior. He was unable to recall the exact time of the noises or even remember what show he was watching, raising further suspicions. Bernard's main problem was that he didn't have a verifiable alibi. However, there was no evidence against him, so the police had to let him go. The next morning, officers came to inspect his house. Bernard greeted them with shouts and was initially unwilling to let them enter. Eventually, he agreed to show them around the first floor of the rented property but continued to make odd comments. Notably, he pointed out a hatch that led to the basement. He remarked that if he had killed someone, he would have hidden the body there, yet he insisted he was innocent and claimed the basement was empty. Upon inspection, there was indeed no one there. Meanwhile, when law enforcement searched Colette's home, they discovered suspicious stains believed to be washed blood, but this could not be confirmed. Despite the lack of evidence, suspicion remained around Bernard. Deciding to keep a close watch on him, the detectives sought to establish the exact time of Colette's disappearance, but clues were scarce. She had been alone for several days with minimal contact with her neighbor until April 15th. Anything could have happened during that time. Investigators began to piece together her movements, partly based on Bernard's statement that he had heard loud noises from the floor above on April 14th, the day before she vanished. As the investigators looked into the case, they realized that no one had seen Colette since April 15th. They managed to locate her friend, who stated that he had last seen Colette on April 14th around 3:30 p.m. at a gathering with mutual friends. He mentioned that after leaving the party, she got into her car intending to drive to Draguignan but planned to stop at home first. This was the only information available and was considered a starting point for the investigation, as more than 40 hours had passed since she went missing. Communicating with Colette's friend helped them determine a rough timeline for when she went missing. In her car, investigators found not only her personal belongings but also her mobile phone. They began analyzing the phone to see whom Colette had communicated with in the hours leading up to her disappearance. Notably, there was a call that lasted about 40 seconds, made shortly before 3:30 p.m. The call was from Sylviane Fabre, Colette's ex-husband's sister. Sylviane was contacted, and she stated that she had met Colette during Colette's marriage to her brother. At that time, Colette's relationship with her husband was not very good, so they decided to separate. However, afterward, the former spouses and their families managed to maintain friendly relations. Sylviane mentioned that back in 2008, they collaborated with Colette to invest money in a joint business. Shortly before Colette's disappearance, the business partners had a small conflict regarding these assets, but Sylviane claimed that everything was resolved, and they continued to work together. Together, Sylviane and Colette created a real estate company that generated a substantial income, which provided Sylviane with a potential motive. Not only were they distant relatives, but they also had shared finances and property, which can often lead to such conflicts. Naturally, Sylviane denied any wrongdoing. Colette's daughter mentioned that Sylviane often had conflicts regarding their joint activities. They could argue and reconcile several times a day. However, Colette's daughter described all these disputes as minor issues that were resolved quickly. The gendarmes checked Sylviane's schedule for the last few days. She had an alibi confirmed by her son. For almost the entire duration of the investigation, suspicions against Sylviane were not substantiated, and the search operation again hit a dead end. On April 17, 2011, the prosecutor's office began a judicial investigation into the disappearance of Colette. With no leads left and all suspicious individuals cleared as unlikely suspects, there was no option but to notify the media and hope, with their assistance, to obtain new witnesses who might have noticed something. At a recent press conference, officials announced that while there were priority leads in the criminal investigation, no suspects had been identified. This news sparked significant interest among journalists, as the case could potentially involve themes of business, money, love, or betrayal. Consequently, rumors began circulating about Colette immediately, some of which were quite alarming. Her information, background, and photos quickly became prominent in newspapers and on television. Her children expressed their desire to see her again and shared how difficult her absence was for them. The most concerning aspect was that the critical 48-hour window for finding her alive had already passed, significantly diminishing the chances of a successful rescue. While the prosecutor's office hoped to gather new leads from the public through the media, the police were actively searching the nearby villages. Following the press conference, the search area was widened, and a special investigative unit took over the case. Colette's disappearance began to attract national attention. The media frenzy intensified as they attempted to connect her case with another notorious crime that had recently shaken France. A few days before Colette went missing in early April 2011, 5 members of the Dupont de Ligonnès family, including the wife and 4 children, were found murdered under the terrace of their home in Nantes. The head of the family, Xavier, disappeared shortly after the murders, having been spotted on the outskirts of the city on April 15. Authorities believe Xavier was responsible for the crime, and he was placed on a nationwide wanted list. Notably, the location of the massacre was only 30 kilometers from Colette's home. The media quickly linked these incidents together. The timing coincided with Colette's likely disappearance, raising the possibility that Xavier kidnapped her. An even stranger coincidence was that the Dupont de Ligonnès family lived in a house that Colette had sold in 1992. Xavier was viewed as a respectable citizen, a devoted husband, and a caring father who was engaged in his community and known for his honesty and fairness. However, it later emerged that Xavier was deep in debt at the time he murdered his family. Just days before the killings, he purchased cement, tools, and 4 bags of lime, suggesting he had a motive and was preparing for the crime. Journalists speculated that Xavier may have had a grudge against Colette, but the reason for his potential revenge remained unclear. Rumors spread quickly, with theories ranging from a fraudulent real estate deal to unrequited love. Others suspected it could be part of a planned escape. Xavier could have taken Colette so they could be together again. Witnesses came forward, claiming they had seen Xavier's car near her home. Some even reported seeing him stop in town on April 14th. Although these accounts seemed unlikely, detectives noticed clear connections between Xavier and Colette. This led them to investigate the possibility that the two had escaped together. Consequently, Colette shifted from being seen as a victim to potentially being viewed as an accomplice in crimes that might have involved Xavier's family. However, friends and family of Colette quickly disputed this theory, asserting that she was not capable of cruelty. As detectives explored new leads that emerged almost daily, they became convinced that there was no romantic or conspiratorial link between Xavier and Colette. They began to feel that the similarities between Xavier and Colette were merely coincidental or tragic coincidences. To definitively eliminate this theory, they decided to examine both Xavier's and Colette's mobile phones. They encountered a challenge. Xavier's phone could not be tracked, and there were no calls or messages from Colette's phone to his. After their investigation, they found no evidence of any contact between the two after the sale of the house. Although the theory regarding Xavier was intriguing, it ultimately consumed valuable police time and resources. 3 weeks after Colette's disappearance, any possible link to Xavier was dismissed. Xavier himself was never found, leaving the French police at an impasse. The case has reached a dead end and will not make any progress until at least May 15, 2011. On this day, about 30 kilometers from Lorgues, 2 tourists were returning from a forest hike and taking photos. While using a remote path to capture some scenic shots, they were hit by a strong, unpleasant smell coming from the side of the path. One of the tourists decided to investigate the source of the odor. As the woman approached a pile of stones, the smell intensified and became unbearable. When she moved one of the stones, she discovered a leg protruding from beneath the rocks. The tourists quickly called the police. Within minutes, gendarmes arrived at the location and found the body of a woman in an advanced state of decomposition, making it difficult to determine her gender. Only her clothing provided a clue. The police attempted to identify the victim but were initially unsuccessful. They took photographs of her clothes, accessories, and jewelry, which were then shown to the families of various women who had gone missing in the area. Among those families were the children of Colette. Her daughter and son recognized their mother based on what she was wearing. Although the gendarmes believed they had identified Colette a month after her disappearance, they chose to wait for more conclusive evidence. DNA analysis was necessary to confirm family ties, as appearance alone could not provide definitive proof. Ultimately, the examination verified the police's suspicions. The body was indeed identified as Colette Durand. On May 17, 2011, an autopsy was conducted on the body that had been found at the Forensic Medical Institute. Unfortunately, the condition of the remains was so poor that the exact cause of death could not be determined. The forensic expert did confirm that Colette had not been abused before her death, but it did not help the police make much progress in the case. As a result, the investigation into her disappearance shifted focus to a murder investigation. On June 9, 2011, Colette's body was buried. Law enforcement officers attended the funeral, knowing that criminals sometimes show up at such events to witness the impact of their actions. Some may seek to relive their emotions, while others might derive satisfaction from seeing the grief of the victim's family. Several officers remained in vehicles, while others blended in with the attendees, discreetly observing the proceedings. During this time, the police noted that Sylvian, Colette's business partner and sister-in-law, was missing from the funeral. Although Sylvian and Colette were close, Sylvian's absence raised suspicions. This concern increased a few days later when Sylvian attempted to end her life. Although she survived with minor injuries and poisoning, her actions were alarming. When the police arrived after a call from Sylvian's neighbor, they found Sylvian lying on her couch at home. She was unable to fully express herself, so she was taken to a medical center for assistance. However, the officers did not leave empty-handed. They discovered a lengthy letter addressed to her son, David Perel, which was several pages long. While the letter did not contain explicit confessions regarding her actions concerning Colette, the detectives interpreted it as a potential admission of guilt prior to her death. The police decided to speak with David, and he provided new insights into the troubled relationship between Sylvian and Colette. He believed that shortly before Colette's death, she and Sylvian had experienced a serious conflict related to their shared business. Intrigued, the detectives asked David to recount his activities on April 14th. He described the daytime as uneventful, but his account of the evening was much more compelling. On April 14th, at around 10 p.m., Sylvian asked David to drive her to Colette's house to discuss some important business matters. Her own car was broken, so she turned to him for help. However, on their way, his car also broke down a few kilometers from home. Despite the rain, they decided to walk back instead. He took the car battery with them, and together they returned in an attempt to fix the car. On the night Colette disappeared, this mother and son spent hours in the rain attempting to repair a car left outside the city. The gendarmes suspected that David was trying to create a questionable alibi to explain his absence from home. This suspicion was further fueled by Sylvian's initial statement to the detectives, in which she claimed she had spent the previous days at home. It seemed implausible that she could forget such a significant event. When Sylvian regained consciousness in the medical center, her account of the events changed. Her new story mirrored what her son had previously told, including all the important details. The gendarmes decided to investigate her claims. They found that on the night of April 14th to 15th, there was no rain in the area. Additionally, it was odd that Sylvian and her son were unable to flag down a passing car for a ride home. Why did they walk so far while carrying a battery with them? The road's vehicle monitoring system revealed that approximately 5 cars passed by during the time they were walking home. It seemed unlikely that none of these drivers would have stopped to assist them in the rain. This raised suspicions that David and Sylvian were hiding something and might be involved in the death of Colette. Unfortunately, there was no physical evidence to support these suspicions. As a result, the decision was made to keep a close watch on them over the next few months. Their phone calls were monitored, and on February 8, 2012, this surveillance yielded important information. The police intercepted a conversation between Sylvian and Bernard, who was Colette's neighbor. It became clear that Bernard knew much more than he had initially revealed. On April 14, he not only heard sounds coming from above but also saw Sylvian's car arrive at the house, indicating he was aware of her actions. David, Sylvian's son, was also involved, as he was driving for his mother. On February 20, 2012, David and Sylvian were arrested. Detectives viewed David as the weak link. During questioning, he quickly confessed, seeming relieved to unburden himself of his guilt. He revealed that on April 14, they arrived at Colette's home around 3:30 p.m. Afterward, Sylvian lured her into a barn behind the house. A business dispute led to further conflict, during which Sylvian attacked Colette, beating her to the ground. Then, she took a rope from the barn and began to strangle Colette in front of David. Although he did not intervene or participate in the attack, he admitted to helping move the body afterward. They left Colette's body on the property, covering it with a tarpaulin. In the evening, when they fabricated the story about the broken car, they took the body out of town. David assisted Sylvian in dragging the deceased away from the road and covering her with stones. Despite David's confession, Sylvian denied any wrongdoing. She claimed the death was accidental and that they hid the body out of fear of the police. However, it was puzzling how well prepared she seemed for the crime, as she had latex gloves that prevented her from leaving fingerprints. After being detained for 48 hours, Sylvian was charged with murder, while David was released. Though he was viewed as an accomplice, his testimony needed verification, so he remained under judicial supervision. The next step was to determine the motive. It turned out that the motive was linked to financial issues. Sylvian's business was on the brink of failure when Colette uncovered that Sylvian was embezzling money from clients. Another possible motive was jealousy, as Colette was thriving while Sylvian's problems continued to grow. Shortly before the tragedy, Sylvian had gone through a painful divorce, and one of her 2 sons had been convicted of violence. Communication between her and David had nearly ceased, and his involvement in the crime marked the end of their close relationship. On January 21, 2014, David was charged in court with the murder of Colette. He claimed that he was only an accomplice and that he helped hide the body due to pressure from his mother. Sylvian, his mother, argued that the incident was an act of involuntary manslaughter. She explained that she had lost her temper after a conflict with her business partner, Colette, who was trying to take everything from her. Facing life in prison, Sylvian sought to downplay her guilt. The prosecutor's office looked into the role of the tenant, Bernard. Although he witnessed the conflict between Sylvian and Colette, he did not report it because he feared Sylvian. Ultimately, he testified as a witness for the prosecution. On January 23, 2014, the jury found Sylvian Fabre guilty of manslaughter, sentencing her to 30 years in prison. Bernard was acquitted, and David Perel received a 3-year suspended sentence. Over the years, Colette's children struggled to understand what had happened in that barn with their mother. Despite the complicated trial, they felt uncertain that the entire truth had been uncovered. They were unhappy with the court's verdict, believing that Sylvian had committed premeditated murder but had received a lenient sentence. Additionally, they felt Bernard was more involved than he had admitted and had evaded responsibility for the crime. The case of Colette Durand is a tragic and mysterious story that leaves many unanswered questions for her family and the community. Colette, a devoted mother, suddenly disappeared, leading to a lengthy investigation filled with suspicions of love, money, and betrayal. Ultimately, the truth was revealed through David's confession and Sylvian's sentencing, but was justice truly served? Bernard, the neighbor with a murky past, remains a significant question mark as he evades all charges. For Colette's children, the pain lies not only in losing their mother but also in the feeling that the secrets surrounding their mother's death may be buried forever. The story of a young Italian college student named Giulia Cecchettin profoundly affected the entire country in the fall of 2023 due to its tragic and senseless nature. Giulia was known for her kindness and trust in others. She showed compassion to a young man who had strong feelings for her, fearing that if she rejected him, he might harm himself. Unfortunately, rather than hurting himself, he directed his pain toward others with devastating results. The full scope of the tragedy was later revealed through Giulia's personal journals, which documented her growing discomfort and emotional struggle. In the aftermath, the individual responsible for the tragedy tried to avoid responsibility by claiming that his actions were driven by overwhelming emotions and temporary confusion. However, the investigation consistently uncovered evidence suggesting that his actions were premeditated. Giulia Cecchettin was born on May 5, 2001, in Padua, Italy. She was the middle child in her family, with an older sister named Elena and a younger brother named Davide. Despite their different personalities, Elena being energetic and rebellious, while Giulia was quiet and obedient, the sisters were very close from an early age. Their family was middle class. Gino, Giulia's father, was an engineer at a local company. Her mother, Monica, worked in city administration. They lived in a spacious house and had several vehicles. Both parents were dedicated to their children. They working hard to provide everything they needed to become kind, responsible individuals. From a young age, Giulia was known for her kindness, empathy. She naturally connected with people, always striving to be helpful and considerate. At times, she was excessively gentle, often avoiding conflict even if it meant sacrificing her own interests. Giulia had a wide circle of friends, effortlessly fit in with any group. In school, she consistently achieved top grades, had a strong interest in literature and foreign languages. However, her true passion lay in art classes, where her teachers recognized her talent and encouraged her to pursue it further. As a teenager, Giulia attended an art academy while still in high school, seriously contemplating a career in the arts. However, as graduation neared, her parents urged her to opt for a more practical, stable career. Taking her father's advice, she enrolled at the University of Padua, one of Italy's leading public universities, chose to study biomedical engineering. Always one to avoid conflict, she agreed without protest and committed herself to her studies, even though she lacked genuine interest in the field. She did not envision a long-term career in biomedical engineering. While at university, Giulia met a classmate named Filippo Turetta, who was also in Padua. Filippo came from a humble background and was the only child of his parents, who cared for him deeply. Giulia and Filippo were in the same department. A mutual attraction quickly grew between them. Their relationship started with long conversations, emotional support, and facing challenges together. When Filippo began to struggle with his studies, Giulia helped him catch up and pass his exams. Soon after, he asked her out on their first date. They officially started dating in January 2022, which was Giulia's first serious relationship. Coming from a protected upbringing, she quickly became very infatuated with him. For the first 6 months, they were nearly inseparable, enjoying each other's company and appearing genuinely happy, which led their family and friends to believe in the strength of their bond. Just 2 months into their relationship, Filippo invited Giulia to dinner at his home, where he referred to her as his future wife while introducing her to his parents. A few weeks later, Giulia reciprocated by bringing Filippo to meet her family. Their friends were convinced that Giulia and Filippo would get engaged by the time they graduated. Life took a devastating turn for Giulia's family when her mother, Monica, was diagnosed with a late-stage illness, and the outlook was grim. Monica's health deteriorated quickly, and despite numerous consultations, doctors indicated there was little hope. The next 6 months felt like a waking nightmare for the Cecchettin family. During this challenging period, Filippo tried his best to provide support. He stayed close to Giulia and also spent time with Monica. Giulia truly valued his presence. She was thankful for his kindness and unwavering support. Nevertheless, even though Monica agreed to participate in experimental treatments, she sadly passed away in October 2022 at just 51 years old. Her death created a huge void in the family. For her husband, Gino, the grief was nearly unbearable. He felt emotionally overwhelmed. It was only through the love and support of his children that he found the strength to carry on. Although Filippo continued to be supportive, changes began occurring in Giulia's feelings toward him. Even though they were still together, she started to feel distant and uncertain about their future. She began to consider ending the relationship but was unsure how to address it without causing conflict or upsetting him. She confided in only her two closest friends, people she had known for years and trusted. They were shocked. On the surface, Giulia and Filippo appeared to be the perfect couple, with a happy, harmonious relationship. However, beneath that facade, things were unraveling. Giulia didn't provide specific details but communicated that the relationship had reached a breaking point and ending it seemed inevitable. She didn't want to hurt Filippo, but she could no longer continue living a lie. The true reason behind her decision would only be revealed much later, following her passing. At that time, Giulia was focused on preparing for her final thesis presentation. However, she realized that she didn't want to pursue a career in biomedical engineering. It simply didn't resonate with her. Without mentioning it to many people, she quietly applied to a prestigious international art school that specializes in comic illustration. When she finally confided in her father, she emphasized that she would complete her university degree as she had promised. She intended to graduate and obtain her qualifications as her parents expected, but after that, she wanted to pursue a second degree in something she was passionate about, becoming an illustrator. Gino listened intently and supported her decision. After the loss of his wife, he had a new outlook on life, recognized its brevity and fragility. He encouraged his daughter to follow her own path, make her own choices, and dedicate herself to what truly made her happy. Giulia's conversation with Filippo turned out to be much harder than she had expected. It took place in August 2023, after they had been together for over a year and a half. Giulia found it difficult to express herself, but Filippo seemed to handle the news maturely. He suggested they remain friends and stay in touch, recognizing the connection they had. Since they attended the same university and studied in the same department, they saw each other frequently. However, less than a week after their breakup, Filippo attempted to rekindle their relationship. He invited Giulia to one of their favorite restaurants, a place that once held special memories for them. He asked her to give their relationship another chance, reminding her of their good times together. Giulia, however, remained resolute. She did not want to repeat old mistakes. The evening ended quietly, but an unspoken tension lingered, only becoming stronger with time. Filippo's behavior took a troubling turn. He began contacting Giulia every day, initially expressing his love and pleading for them to get back together. However, this quickly shifted to manipulation and threats. He warned that he might harm himself if they didn't reconcile. Knowing Giulia's compassionate nature, he exploited her empathy, pushing her emotional buttons. Concerned for his well-being due to his unstable nature, Giulia reluctantly agreed to stay in touch. They briefly resumed seeing each other, driven more by worry than love. Giulia hoped this was only temporary and that their connection would eventually fade. However, Filippo's behavior became increasingly alarming. He flooded her with messages, some of which were distressing. In one, he ominously stated that they would either be together forever or their lives would both end. Although this was a clear threat, Giulia chose not to report it and only confided in her closest friend. This intense situation persisted for nearly 2 months. In late October 2023, Giulia realized she could no longer live in fear. She was set to present her thesis in medical engineering on November 16th, and her classes at the International School of Comics were starting in December. Her schedule was now fully packed, leaving no time for emotional drama or unhealthy attachments. Although still anxious about how Filippo would react, she decided to invite him to a quiet cafe they used to visit. She carefully chose her words to avoid any conflict, explaining that they could remain friends but nothing more. Despite her attempt to be respectful, Filippo was deeply disturbed by her decision. He took the news hard, began to call and message her frequently, but Giulia, busy with her thesis, limited him responses to brief notes. It was around this time that Filippo started secretly following her. He soon noticed she was spending time with someone new guy. Their friendship appeared warm and affectionate, suggesting they might become a couple. Filippo struggled to accept this, and a darker plan began to take shape in his mind. On Saturday, November 11, 2023, Giulia dedicated most of her day to her graduation project. At around 5 p.m., she sent the final version to her academic advisor. Earlier that day, about an hour before, her ex-boyfriend Filippo called her, asking if she would join him to shop for shoes for their upcoming graduation ceremony. It was unusual for him to reach out, as he hadn't contacted her at all for about a week. No texts, calls, or visits. Giulia thought that he had finally accepted their breakup and moved on. Wanting to remain on good terms, she agreed to help him with the shopping. They planned for him to pick her up at 6 p.m. Giulia informed her father that she would be home before midnight and hugged him tightly as she left, unaware that it would be the last time he would see her alive. Filippo arrived at the Sacchetin house right on time. Giulia got into the passenger seat, and they drove to the shopping center in Margra. Witnesses later reported seeing them calmly browsing the stores together. They bought a pair of shoes. Chiaretta and Giulia also had dinner together at a McDonald's inside the mall at around 9:02 p.m., with Giulia paying for both meals with her credit card. They then left the building at around 10:30 p.m. At 10:43 p.m., Giulia sent her final message via WhatsApp to her sister Elena, who was in Vienna at the time for college. However, at 10:45 p.m., her messages suddenly stopped, and she never replied again. Shortly after, her phone was turned off. When Giulia didn't come home by midnight, her family started to worry. At first, they tried to remain calm, thinking she might have just lost track of time. However, by 1 a.m., they began to sense that something was very wrong. Giulia never stayed out overnight without letting someone know. Her phone was off, and they couldn't reach Filippo. Her father and older sister went to file a missing person report while her younger brother stayed home in case Giulia returned. They still held on to a small hope that her phone had died or that she had been delayed, but they believed she would have found a way to let them know she was okay. Police were doubtful about the situation. They pointed out that as an adult, Giulia had the right to choose not to return home or inform anyone of her location. Only a few hours had passed since she was last seen, and according to standard procedure, search efforts for missing adults usually do not start until 24 hours after they go missing. What no one knew at that moment was that about 4 hours before her family reported her missing, an alarming incident had already occurred. This detail was initially overlooked in relation to Giulia's disappearance, but it would soon become evident that it was significant. At around 11:15 p.m. on the night Giulia disappeared, local police received a call from a man. While on his balcony smoking a cigarette, he witnessed something alarming. His apartment overlooked a small parking lot across the street, where he heard someone screaming for help. When he looked more closely, he saw a young woman, clearly terrified, escape from a parked car. Moments later, a man exited the same car, chased her down, and forced her back inside while appearing to hit her. He then pushed her into the back seat and quickly drove off, speeding into the night. The witness tried to remember the license plate number, but couldn't see it clearly in the dark and from a distance. He did remember that the car was a black compact vehicle, possibly a Fiat Punto. He quickly called the local authorities to report what he had witnessed, but since he didn't have many identifying details, they had little to work with. Initially, the authorities dismissed his call because they didn't see it as an immediate threat and chose not to respond. However, the man couldn't shake the feeling that what he had seen was more serious than they realized. Believing he had witnessed a crime, he decided to go to the police station in person. At the station, he met a man named Gino, who was there to report his daughter, Giulia, missing. To their surprise, they discovered they lived only a few houses apart. The man's building was near the end of the street, right across from a small parking lot where the unsettling scene had occurred. The black compact car he described looked a lot like the one driven by Filippo. That same evening, Filippo had picked up his former girlfriend in his black Fiat Punto before they went to the shopping center. Investigators reached out to Filippo's parents, who were understandably anxious. They had been calling friends in hopes of hearing from their son, but unfortunately, no one could provide any helpful information to the police. Officers were quickly sent to the parking lot, which was now thought to be the location of a violent incident. To their disappointment, there were no security cameras in the area. However, security video footage from a factory in the nearby town of Fosso shows Filippo brutally beating Giulia. When she tried to escape, Filippo hit her again from behind, then stuffed her bleeding body into the trunk of his black Fiat Punto. When arriving at the scene of the attack, what they uncovered was alarming. On the ground was a large knife, its blade broken near the handle. Nearby were several dark reddish stains. Although the blood wasn't excessive, it indicated that someone had been injured. Forensic experts confirmed that the knife bore Filippo's fingerprints, the blood matched Giulia's DNA. The broken blade and a deep gouge in the pavement. Investigators feared the worst but still hoped that Giulia might be alive and urgently in need of help. Both students' phones had been turned off shortly after the incident. Data indicated that their last known location was that parking lot where the suspected assault and abduction occurred. Law enforcement opened a criminal case against Filippo, charging him with assault and unlawful detention based on the evidence collected. His parents were shocked and firmly believed that their son would never hurt Giulia, claiming he loved her deeply. Detectives started tracking Filippo's movements by examining footage from roadside surveillance cameras. Later that night, a black Fiat Punto was spotted heading towards a lake in the Porton province. The next day, the vehicle was seen in multiple areas. On November 12, a young man who matched Filippo's description bought something at a gas station near the Austrian border. He used a €20 bill that had what looked like dried blood on it. The cashier didn't pay much attention to this detail at the time, but later surveillance footage confirmed that the buyer was indeed Filippo. A disturbing piece of evidence surfaced shortly after. Security video footage from a factory in the nearby town of Fosso shows Filippo brutally beating Giulia. After the assault, he stood over her lifeless body for several minutes before putting her in the trunk of a car. Investigators found pools of blood and clear signs of a struggle at the scene, leaving no doubt that Giulia had likely been killed. However, her remains were still missing, and the suspect's whereabouts were unknown. Filippo was officially declared wanted throughout Europe. Giulia's body was discovered near Lake Barsis in Piancavallo on November 18, 2023 by the Special Dogs Unit of the Civil Protection. The body was found inside a large nylon bag in a cave at 50 meters altitude, within a wooded area that is generally closed during the autumn-winter period for security reasons. The Italian Forensic Services performed an autopsy on December 1, 2023, and reported that Giulia's body had over 20 stab wounds. She had blunt force trauma to her head, and there were clear signs of her wrists being restrained. Additionally, adhesive residue on her face indicated that her mouth had been taped shut. The circumstances of this case suggested a personal motive and an unusual amount of anger. Filippo was found on November 19 in an emergency lane of a motorway near Leipzig after his car had run out of petrol. Authorities arrested him and sent him back to Italy, where the case had caused a national uproar. During his initial questioning, Filippo confessed in detail about the events, but he stated that he was emotionally disoriented at the time and couldn't recall some parts of what happened. He recounted that they had spent a pleasant day shopping at the mall. On their way back, they stopped in a parking lot near Giulia's house. Filippo gave her a stuffed animal as a gift and asked if they could start their relationship over. Giulia reportedly raised her voice, rejected the gift, and got out of the car, which he claimed triggered a sudden outburst of anger. He grabbed a knife and chased after Giulia, injuring her shoulder in the process. She fell to the ground, and when he tried to strike her again, he missed, causing his knife to break when it hit the pavement. Filippo claimed he forced her back into the car, tied her wrists with rope, and covered her mouth with tape before driving around without a specific destination. Eventually, they ended up in an industrial area. According to him, Giulia managed to open the door and escape. He then took out a second knife and pursued her, continuing to attack until she stopped moving. When asked how many times he hit her, Filippo estimated maybe 5 or 7. However, the forensic team found over 20 wounds, and his story of an unplanned outburst was contradicted by the fact that he had arrived at the meeting with 2 knives, rope, tape, and plastic bags, indicating he was prepared. Filippo claimed he planned to take his own life afterward in order to be with Giulia. He even revealed shallow cuts on his wrists, although he confessed he didn't go through with it. He found it easier to end another's life than to end his own. Despite strong evidence implicating him, his family's legal team maintained that he was mentally confused and had memory loss. Their entire defense strategy focused on this idea, aiming for a lighter sentence or a transfer to a psychiatric facility instead of serving time in prison. Giulia's father, in his grief, took a remarkable action. He gave investigators pages from her personal diary and later made some of them public. His goal was to reveal the truth and draw attention to what his daughter had experienced. The diary entries clearly explained why Giulia had decided to end her relationship with Filippo and what was happening out of public view. Although she had loved him, Filippo had become controlling, emotionally manipulative. He monitored her whereabouts, kept track of her phone and social media, forbade her from seeing friends, and expected her to obey his demands at all times. A significant conflict occurred just before the tragedy involving Filippo's insistence on attending a small family birthday party for Giulia's sister, Elena. This event took place shortly after their mother had passed away, and Giulia's family was not in the mood to celebrate. Despite this, Filippo was angry, feeling that he was part of the family and had the right to attend all family gatherings. This disagreement made Giulia reconsider their relationship, and she recognized that she needed to end things for good. However, Filippo began to use emotional manipulation, threatening to harm himself if she left him. Giulia, being compassionate and empathetic, felt guilty about this. Unfortunately, her kindness would eventually lead to devastating consequences. On September 23, 2024, the summary trial of Filippo Turetta began at the Venice court. He is charged with intentional homicide, aggravated by malice, cruelty, brutality, stalking, and improper disposal of a corpse. By the start of the trial, new evidence indicated that the crime had been premeditated. Investigators discovered that Filippo had begun planning the attack about a week prior, conducting extensive online research for isolated locations in the suburbs that he could use to carry out the act and conceal the aftermath. His browsing history confirmed this. During a search of his car, officers found a printed map of the area. Initially, its relevance was unclear, but it later became evident that Filippo had chosen to use a physical map instead of GPS to avoid leaving a digital footprint. He meticulously planned every detail, but he seemed uncertain about what to do afterward. There were weak indications that he might have considered self-harm, but this was not convincing. By the time of his trial, it was clear that Filippo had acted with intent. He abandoned the emotional disorientation defense and made no claims of psychological instability, admitting that his actions were intentional. As expected, Turetta was questioned at the hearing on October 25, where he presented a 40-page memorial in which he detailed his actions. This prompted the court to cancel the hearing scheduled for October 28, as sufficient questioning had already taken place. At the hearing on November 25, 2024, the prosecutor requested a life sentence for Filippo Turetta. He was sentenced to life imprisonment on December 3, 2024, concluding the trial at the first instance. Aggravating circumstances of premeditated murder, kidnapping, and concealment of the body were acknowledged, while charges of stalking and cruelty were dismissed. In addition, Filippo must pay €760,000 in compensation to the Sacchetin family. In his final statement to the court, Filippo stated he would not appeal the verdict, acknowledging it as fair and expressing no intention to contest the outcome. The story of Jonathan Paul Copenhaver, known as War Machine, is both intriguing and unsettling. He transitioned from being a rising star on a reality TV show to a controversial mixed martial artist and successful adult film actor, ultimately becoming a convicted criminal serving a life sentence. Throughout his career, he crafted an image as a bold and confrontational person, which contributed to his popularity. However, over time, the distinction between his fighting persona and his true self began to fade. He didn't just compete in the screen, his entire life started to resemble a constant struggle. Jonathan was born on November 30, 1981, in Simi Valley, a suburban area near Los Angeles. He was the oldest of 3 children in a working-class family. His father, of German descent, was a dedicated officer with the Los Angeles Police Department, known for his hard work and discipline. His mother, who had Mexican ancestry, initially worked as a nurse at a local hospital but chose to leave her job after having their first child to focus on raising the family and managing the household. Jonathan, often called John, had a close relationship with his younger brother and sister. For a while, their home life was happy and stable. However, after the birth of their youngest sibling, their mother started to experience significant emotional struggles. She fell into a long-term depression and turned to alcohol for relief. What began as a way to cope quickly became a daily habit. Meanwhile, their father worked long hours and was often away from home, unaware of the worsening situation. As time went on, their mother's condition deteriorated further. She began using banned substance. By the time Jonathan was 10 years old, he had become the primary caregiver for his siblings and even his mother. He was performing well in school, helping his younger siblings with their homework, learning to cook, and managing household duties. However, everything changed when Jonathan was 13. He faced a traumatic event that would affect him for life. One evening, while the entire family was at home, his father suddenly collapsed due to a heart emergency. Their mother was unconscious after taking substances, making Jonathan the only person able to help. He quickly called emergency services and tried to perform life-saving measures on his own, doing everything possible to keep his father alive until help arrived. Unfortunately, despite his efforts, his father passed away before the paramedics got there. Jonathan was just a child, and no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't shake the feeling that he had somehow failed his father. This burden left him with a lasting emotional scar. It is surprising that, even though his mother struggled with alcoholism and banned substance abuse, no one took steps to remove the children from her care. They stayed with her, and John, still a teenager, took on the role of the household leader. They survived on the small savings left by their father. Despite the turmoil at home, John continued to perform well in school and was regarded as one of the top students in his class. Teachers often praised his intelligence, ambition, and quick thinking. However, his behavior outside of school began to change significantly. He became anxious, unpredictable. He easily angered, often getting into arguments and physical fights with his classmates. Jonathan began taking odd jobs at a young age to help support his family. During this time, he developed a deep interest in sports, particularly combat sports, and trained in various disciplines instead of sticking to just one. This training provided him a positive outlet for his aggression, helping him to clear his mind and maintain focus. Over the years, working out became an essential part of his life. He went to the gym daily, where his coach recognized his natural talent, leading many to believe he had the potential to succeed at the highest levels. Despite balancing work and school, Jonathan excelled in both and graduated high school with good grades, later enrolling at the Citadel. He was academically sharp, but his struggle with managing emotions, particularly anger, resulted in several encounters with the law, including multiple arrests. Jonathan majored in biology for 2 years but was expelled for poor behavior. As a teenager, Jonathan was determined to become a fighter and pursue a career in MMA. He trained relentlessly and participated in every competition available, frequently achieving top results. Over time, more people in the fighting community began to notice him. His name started to gain recognition, bringing him closer to turning professional. In 2000, at the age of 19, Jonathan chose to audition for a popular reality show called The Ultimate Fighter. This show, inspired by successful formats like Big Brother, quickly gained popularity among American viewers, but it had a unique twist. Instead of featuring everyday contestants, the show showcased actual MMA fighters competing for a chance to join the UFC. Initially, Jonathan was not selected. He was turned down during the casting process. However, shortly afterward, One of the chosen contestants sustained a serious injury and had to withdraw from the show. The producers rushed to find a replacement and revisited previous applicants, leading them to Jonathan's name, which they had initially overlooked. All contestants were placed in a large house equipped with multiple surveillance cameras in every room. They were not allowed to use phones, the internet, or have any contact with the outside world. The grand prize was $1 million. Each week, one participant was eliminated not through voting, but by losing one-on-one fights. The loser had to leave the show and go home. Like most reality TV shows, there was no strict script. Instead, spontaneity and genuine emotions were encouraged. John, known for his bold personality and confrontational style, quickly became a prominent figure on the show. Audiences loved his confidence. Jonathan rapidly gained a fan base, becoming a standout reality star. The Ultimate Fighter attracted more attention for the drama in the house than for the actual fights. Initially, it was purely a competitive sports series, but it transformed into a high-stakes reality show filled with intense confrontations, rivalries, and alliances. Contestants were often split into opposing teams. Jonathan became known for his fiery temperament and tendency to provoke others, often starting fights. His aggressive demeanor increased the tension in the house. The producers seemed to enjoy it. While fans supported him, Jonathan ultimately didn't make it to the finals, as he was eliminated in the 6th season. Although Jonathan did not win the competition, his time on the show brought him significant attention. His professional MMA career began to thrive, starting with a victory over Jared Rollins in his UFC debut. Fighting in the welterweight division, Jonathan participated in a total of 19 matches, achieving 14 wins. However, his life outside the ring began to unravel. His unpredictable behavior and difficulty managing his anger led to several legal issues. On September 22, 2007, he was arrested for assaulting a Las Vegas man after an argument over a parking space escalated into a physical confrontation. Reports indicate that Jonathan continued to hit the man until he lost consciousness. The victim filed charges, and Jonathan was arrested. Instead of expressing remorse, he gave a controversial interview claiming he had done the man a favor by not causing more harm. His remarks resulted in public outrage, branded him as volatile and dangerous. Ironically, this negative attention ended up benefiting his career. Jonathan embraced the persona of the villain, using his reputation to attract media coverage and gain popularity. His behavior reminded many of another controversial fighter, Conor McGregor, who is known for mixing sports achievements with off-ring issues. In mid-2008, Machine decided to change his name to War Machine, believing it reflected his personality and mindset well. The name sounded tough and intense, fitting for the world of full-contact sports he was involved in. That same year, Machine faced another controversy related to an assault. The situation began over a minor issue but quickly escalated to legal action. Many observers noted that Machine was on a dangerous path. He seemed to look for reasons to start fights and actively sought out confrontation. Even with the incidents and arrests, his professional MMA career continued to flourish. He participated in major events and secured numerous victories, gaining recognition in the MMA community. Before long, he was invited to fight in the UFC, the sport's top organization. He also received a Knockout of the Night award for his outstanding performance in the octagon. In 2009, Machine made an unexpected announcement. He intended to pursue acting, but not in a conventional way. He decided to join the adult entertainment industry. Thanks to his youthful looks, rugged, and athletic build, Machine made a notable impact on screen. His performances soon attracted a lot of attention, making his career in this field as discussed as his MMA achievements. During his first year, he appeared in 13 films, frequently working with established performers. He adeptly managed both his fighting and acting careers while securing various endorsement deals that generated substantial income. In August 2010, Machine was sentenced to 1 year in county jail for felony assault stemming from a fight at a bar in Point Loma earlier in the year, as well as another fight at a bar in Pacific Beach, San Diego. He was held in San Diego's George Bailey County Detention Facility. During his time in prison, Machine continued to exhibit confrontational behavior, leading to numerous altercations. This resulted in him being labeled as high risk and spending most of his sentence in solitary confinement. Observers began to realize that his aggression had evolved beyond a competitive attitude and was instead indicative of a significant behavioral issue. Some speculated that the pressures of fame or emotional instability might be contributing factors. After his release, Machine returned to the ring and achieved several impressive victories against tough competitors such as Roger Huerta, Blas Avena, and Vaughn Anderson. During this period, he started a personal blog and social media page to engage with his expanding fan base. His content was unique, often featuring him speaking directly to the camera. He's sharing his personal thoughts, reflections, and stories from his past. Within just a few days, tens of thousands of fans subscribed to his platform. His audience was varied. Some were interested in his fighting career, others in his experiences in the film industry, and many were drawn in by the controversy surrounding him since his early days on reality TV. In 2011, Machine launched his own line of athletic and casual clothing. His brand was notable for its bold graphics and aggressive slogans aimed at projecting an alpha male image. The products were primarily sold online and quickly became popular, contributing to the company's success. Machine maintained a confrontational demeanor, often discussed his struggles with anger in his video blogs. His language was often profane, and he frequently expressed frustration with people he found irritating, sometimes implying he would respond with violence if provoked. He even filmed himself getting into heated confrontations with strangers on the street. By 2013, Machine had achieved the height of his adult film career, frequently appearing in adult productions and taking part in bold photo shoots for popular magazines. During one of these shoots, he worked with a model named Christy Mack. Although she was 11 years younger than he, they had an instant connection and quickly developed a passionate relationship. Christy was born in 1992 in a small Indiana town. She grew up in a modest family with no connections to the entertainment industry. Her former classmates and teachers remember her as quiet, kind, and responsible. She had a passion for literature, took her studies seriously, and enjoyed dancing in her free time. During high school, Christy developed a romantic relationship with a classmate, and they decided to get married. Despite strong objections from both sets of parents about their young age, the couple went ahead with their plans as soon as they turned 18. Unfortunately, their marriage soon fell apart. They realized they were not ready for adult life. Love quickly faded. Just 4 months after getting married, they filed for divorce. After her breakup, Christy wanted to start anew and decided to leave her home for Florida. She moved to Miami and took whatever job she could find to pay her rent, make ends meet. She worked as a waitress, retail clerk, even took on promotional work. One day, a representative from a modeling agency noticed her. Initially, Christy did catalog shoots for fashion brands, but soon she was offered more provocative modeling jobs that paid much better. She accepted these opportunities, and before long, she began getting offers to act in adult films. She chose a memorable stage name that became well known. Christy quickly became a regular in adult film productions, including a notable parody based on a popular superhero franchise. Her work in the industry earned her several awards. In February 2013, she launched her first boutique that focused on intimate apparel and lifestyle accessories. The business quickly gained popularity, grew into a successful retail chain. When Machine and Christy first met, both were already prominent and successful figures in their fields. They had established careers in the media and each owned businesses that sold branded merchandise. Their popularity was quite similar. Right from the start of their relationship, they were frequently seen together at various events. They attended award shows, red carpet events, and industry parties, often stopping for photos, participating in joint interviews. They even secured a few endorsement deals as a couple with major brands. Within months, Machine and Christy became known as a glamorous and inseparable pair who seemed to have everything. They appeared happy, discussed their future plans. To outsiders, their lives looked perfect. Behind the scenes, things are getting worrying. Off camera, Machine was just as intense, unpredictable as he had been in the ring. In public, he acted like a devoted boyfriend, but privately, he was controlling and manipulative. He monitored Christie closely, showed extreme jealousy, frequently started arguments. His behavior escalated to outright aggression over time. Christie suffered from regular emotional and physical abuse. He would insult her, make threats, and there were several instances where he reportedly put his hands around her neck in moments of rage. During one of these events, her mother, who was visiting, saw it happen. Shocked, she urged Christie to leave Machine right away. Machine had a quick temper and often exploded without warning. Once, during a heated argument in the car, he suddenly slammed on the gas and drove straight toward a wall, shouting that he would take them both down with him. Christie barely managed to grab the steering wheel in time to avoid a crash. In another similar situation, she quickly unbuckled her seatbelt and jumped out of the car at a red light. Although Christie tried to end their relationship multiple times, Machine always found a way to pull her back in, pleading for another chance and promising to change. Deep down, she understood there was no future with him, but she was scared. She didn't know how to leave without triggering one of his violent outbursts. She endured this for a year, carefully considering her options. In April 2014, Christie finally found the courage to have an important conversation. She prepared herself for a difficult reaction, but to her surprise, Machine calmly agreed that they should take a break. He expressed understanding and seemed willing to give her the space she needed. Although it seemed he had accepted the decision, that was only a facade. During the first month after the breakup, Christie felt constantly anxious, fearing that Machine might come back to stalk her. Thankfully, nothing of the sort occurred. As time went on, her anxiety lessened, and she gradually returned to her normal life. By July, she started dating a new guy named Corey Thomas. On August 8, 2014, Christie and Corey were in her Las Vegas apartment, lying in bed. Without warning, Jonathan, who had a key he never returned, entered quietly, attacked Corey. He struck Corey repeatedly with his fists and bit him multiple times, causing severe injuries to Corey's face, shoulders, and chest. Jonathan then straddled Corey and began to choke him. Terrified, Christine intervened when she saw Corey start to lose consciousness. Machine suddenly released his grip, pulled Corey by the hair, threatened him, saying he had to leave and couldn't call the police or he would finish what he started. Frightened, Corey promised not to tell anyone. He quickly gathered a few belongings, fled the apartment while still getting dressed. True to his promise, he didn't report the incident, which almost ended in tragedy for Christie. After Jonathan was alone with his ex-girlfriend Christie, a terrible situation unfolded. He physically assaulted her for over 2 hours, inflicting severe physical and emotional harm. By the end of the attack, Christie was left badly injured, near unconsciousness. Thinking she had lost consciousness, Jonathan moved to another room. In a determined effort, Christie managed to crawl to the window, open it, and fall out. Luckily, the apartment was on the ground floor, so she didn't suffer fatal injuries. She began to scream for help. Nearby neighbors quickly responded by calling emergency services. Christie sustained serious injuries. Jonathan had broken her nose, cheekbone, and jaw, knocked out 12 teeth, and nearly damaged one of her eyes. Additionally, she had broken ribs, a ruptured kidney, liver injuries. She lost a significant amount of blood and was diagnosed with a concussion. Her body was covered in bruises, cuts, abrasions, and bite marks. Despite these severe injuries and blood loss, doctors managed to stabilize Christie's condition. Jonathan had already vanished. His location stayed unknown for a week until August 15th, when he began posting on social media to share his perspective and portray himself as the victim. Authorities were able to trace his phone signal, quickly found and arrested him. Notably, Corey called the police 3 hours after the attack, during which Christie was already hospitalized. In those hours, she suffered severe abuse that nearly took her life. Some people believed Corey should have been legally responsible for not reporting the incident sooner, but he stated that he was in shock and afraid for his own safety. Ultimately, no charges were brought against him. He only testified in court as a victim. While in custody awaiting his trial, Jonathan attempted to end one's own life. He made a makeshift noose from a bed sheet and tried to hang himself in his cell. Luckily, the guards arrived in time and prevented him from succeeding. This incident delayed the court proceedings by almost 3 months. During the trial, Jonathan tried to present himself as a victim. He argued that his partner had betrayed him, claiming that this betrayal led to his emotional outburst. His defense attorney spoke extensively about Jonathan's difficult childhood and personal struggles, hoping to gain the court's sympathy for a lighter sentence. In March 2017, Jonathan was convicted of 29 felony counts of abuse, kidnapping, domestic violence, and other crimes after abuse, assaulting and beating his ex-girlfriend, Christy Mack, and her then-boyfriend Corey Thomas. In June 2017, he was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 36 years. Jonathan Paul Koppenhaver, known as War Machine, fell from a charismatic MMA star and reality TV figure to a convicted felon, his legacy tarnished by violence in Las Vegas. His 2014 assault on Christy Mack and Corey Thomas left them with severe physical and enduring trauma. Convicted in 2017 of 29 felonies, including kidnapping and sexual assault, he was sentenced to 36 years to life, with no parole possible before 2053, Web 0, Web 7. This case underscores the catastrophic cost of uncontrolled rage, reminding us that justice, though served, cannot undo the pain inflicted on survivors striving to reclaim their lives. At around 3:30 a.m., Shauna Taife returned home after a long work shift. The streets were silent, and everything appeared normal as she parked in her garage. She entered her home, likely hoping for some much-needed rest. However, someone was already inside, lurking in the shadows. Soon after, a horrifying event occurred. By sunrise, police had surrounded her home, and the findings of the investigation stunned everyone. Shauna was born on March 13, 1966, in Salt Lake City, Utah, a place known for its snowy mountains and strong Mormon traditions. She was one of 7 siblings and showed her creativity from a young age, often getting lost in books or drawing. School represented more to her than just classes. She had a vibrant personality, became a cheerleader, and had a large group of friends. During her teenage years, her family moved first to Broomall, Pennsylvania, and then to North Virginia. Each of these moves helped her build resilience and fueled her desire to create a life of her own. In 1994, at the age of 28, Shauna took a significant step by leaving her familiar surroundings to move west to Las Vegas, Nevada, a vibrant city known for its constant reinvention. Las Vegas welcomed her with its bright lights and energetic atmosphere. She started her new journey by working in a luxury department store. Later, she switched to the hospitality industry, beginning as bartender at Fiesta Hotel and eventually securing a sought-after role at the renowned Palms Casino Resort. There, surrounded by glamour and a demanding clientele, Shauna flourished. Her co-workers felt like family to her. Her job provided both satisfaction and financial security. Shauna radiated warmth, with her light blonde hair, stylish appearance, and graceful presence that captured attention. However, it wasn't just her physical beauty that attracted people, it was her genuine kindness, cheerful laughter, and ability to connect with others on a personal level. Her friends described her as vibrant, positive, and committed, someone who discovered joy in the small moments of life. In 2002, Shauna's life changed once more when she met George Taife. He was tall, athletic, and exuded confidence, someone who made a strong first impression. George had an impressive background. He was a former star football player in high school, prom king, a West Point graduate, and later became a U.S. Army engineer before becoming a firefighter. He had a magnetic personality and a kind heart, known for his willingness to help others, including financially supporting his mother, who took care of his disabled sister. Their connection was immediate and powerful. Friends admired the way they complemented each other, two ambitious, charismatic people who seemed meant to be together. Their love story grew stronger with the birth of their daughter, Madison Taylor Taife. For Shauna, becoming a mother was everything. She cherished every moment with Madison, enjoying hours of karaoke, laughter, and making unforgettable memories. On March 16, 2006, Shauna and George celebrated their love with a wedding by the beach in Hawaii, surrounded by ocean waves and gentle breezes. However, beneath this beautiful moment, challenges were already starting to emerge. 2 years into their marriage, problems began to emerge. The 2008 housing market crash severely impacted George, creating financial stress that affected their relationship. Shauna loved to spend money, while George wanted to save, which led to frequent and heated arguments over issues that were once trivial. George's growing frustration turned into possessiveness, criticism, and emotional distance. His hurtful comments, especially when directed at Shauna in front of Madison, stung deeply. Compounding these issues was George's increasing friendship with Noel Stevens, a homeless man he had brought in to help with yard work. Although George had always been sympathetic to those in need, Shauna felt uneasy about Stevens. His constant presence in their home only intensified the emotional rift between them. As the months went by, the tension between Shauna and George increased, leading to the breakdown of their relationship. After nearly 10 years together, Shauna made the tough decision to leave, taking their daughter Madison with her. She relocated to a quiet suburb near Las Vegas, hoping that the change would bring her clarity. Although she had separated from George, she wasn't ready to give up entirely. Divorce wasn't an option yet, and she still held on to some hope. Maybe with time and counseling, they could reconnect. Shauna and George agreed to try marriage counseling as a last effort to save their relationship. While the counseling sessions prompted some reflection, they couldn't bridge the emotional gap between them. As they continued living apart, the possibility of reconciliation became more difficult to envision. By September 2012, Shauna's hope had diminished, and the future she once imagined felt increasingly out of reach. Then something unexpected happened that shattered any sense of safety Shauna had left. One evening, after returning home from work, she found her house in disarray. Someone had broken in. Her belongings were scattered everywhere, drawers were opened, and several personal items were missing, including her engagement ring, some underwear, a bikini, and a black dress. Strangely, the intruder had left behind a small, folded pair of boxers on the washing machine and had taken vodka from the fridge. This violation deeply affected Shauna. It didn't feel like a random burglary, it felt personal. Although shaken, she tried to move on by focusing on her work and caring for Madison, but the feeling of unease lingered. On the early morning of September 29, 2012, Shauna finished her shift at the casino and clocked out at 3:01 a.m. After walking through the employee exit, she got into her car for the usual 30-minute drive home. By around 3:30 a.m., Shauna arrived home, parked in the garage, and entered through the interior door. As she walked toward the staircase, she was unaware of the attacker waiting in the shadows. Suddenly, she was struck violently on the head with a hammer, causing her to collapse. The assault continued. Despite Shauna pleading for her life, asking why is he doing this repeatedly, her attacker remained silent and continued to strike her. When she finally stopped moving, the assailant fled through the same garage door that Shauna had used, taking the hammer with him. A few hours later, just after 9 a.m., George finished his shift at the fire station. Like he usually did when Shauna worked late, he picked up Madison from his mother's house. Shauna and George shared custody, and Madison was going to stay with her father for a few days. George then drove to Shauna's house to gather some of Madison's belongings. However, as he got closer, he sensed that something was wrong. The garage door was open. Shauna was always very careful and never left the garage door open, especially overnight. This detail filled George with a sense of dread. As he entered the house, his worst fears came true. The inside was a mess, and it was clear there had been a struggle. Then he saw her. Shauna was lying motionless on the floor, and blood was everywhere around her. George called 911, told the dispatcher he had found his wife and she wasn't moving. His voice sounded calm. However, there were times when his words stumbled. When first responders arrived, they were confronted with a gruesome scene. Investigators were shocked by the brutality of the attack. Shauna had sustained severe injuries to her head, so extreme that paramedics initially thought they might be gunshot wounds. However, further forensic examination uncovered the reality: she had been struck repeatedly with a blunt object in a violent assault. Her hands were badly injured and bruised, showing signs of defensive wounds. She had fought back. In her final moments, she displayed incredible bravery. Detectives initially focused on George, following standard procedure in domestic homicide cases, where they questioned those closest to the victim first. However, George had a solid alibi. He had been working for 24 hours straight at the fire station, which was confirmed by his co-workers and supervisors. With that lead ruled out, the investigators shifted their attention elsewhere. Shauna's murder deeply affected her friends and co-workers, many of whom also worked late shifts at the Palms Casino Resort. The brutal nature of the crime and a break-in that had occurred weeks earlier left them feeling vulnerable and scared. They began to question whether someone had been watching them as well and whether the attack was random or targeted. Detectives revisited the earlier break-in at Shauna's home from 3 weeks prior. This incident had unsettled her. Personal items were stolen, including her underwear, bikini, and engagement ring, while a strange pair of men's boxers was found neatly folded on the washing machine. The details of the break-in didn't align with a typical burglary, making the situation feel even more menacing. Neighbors reported hearing loud, rhythmic thuds between 3:30 and 4 a.m. on the morning of Shauna's murder. This timing matched her arrival home, indicating she may have been attacked shortly after entering. Soon after, another clue emerged. Shauna's personal items, such as her cell phone, health card, and makeup, were discovered scattered along a trail about half a mile from her home. This evidence suggested that the killer had escaped on foot in that direction. William Penix, commonly known as Big Will, was a well-known handyman and mentor to recently released inmates in the Las Vegas community. One of these inmates, a man nicknamed Greyhound, confessed to a shocking crime. With an unsettling casualness, Greyhound recounted how he had attacked a woman with a hammer, even smiling as he mentioned the hammer breaking from the impact. Big Will was initially taken aback, but when he saw news coverage of Shauna's murder, the details began to align in his mind. He promptly alerted the authorities, informing them that Greyhound often loitered at a nearby Albertsons, where he scavenged and sold banned substance. Across the street at a Chevron gas station, Greyhound was known for regularly dealing banned substance. Law enforcement quickly located and arrested him there. Greyhound was found with narcotics and revealed his real name, Noel Stevens. This was not the first time his name had come up. Stevens had a criminal history that included petty theft, banned substance offenses, and squatting. Now, he was a suspect in a murder case. During the interrogation, he denied being involved in Shauna's death, but he admitted that he had been living in a tent on a remote hill. The police were concerned he might have hidden evidence there, so they used helicopters to survey the area and searched his campsite. They quickly found crucial evidence. Inside the tent, investigators discovered a pair of pants with blood stains. Forensic testing confirmed their worst fears: it was Shauna's blood. Digital records provided crucial information. Phone data showed a startling revelation: Stevens was in regular contact with George. Their connection was more complex and troubling than anyone realized. George had employed Stevens for various tasks at home, but he had also reportedly taken advantage of Stevens' weaknesses and desperation. With the promise of thousands to Noel, George orchestrated a plan to end his wife's life. From the start, Shauna's sister, Paula Castleton, suspected something was off. Even with George's strong alibi, she felt he wasn't innocent and decided to travel to Las Vegas to assist with the investigation. Believing that something more sinister had occurred behind the scenes, her instincts turned out to be alarmingly correct. When the police who searched Stevens' campsite discovered incriminating evidence, stolen clothing from Shauna's previous burglary and a vodka bottle with his DNA on it. This bottle was the same type used in the burglary weeks before her murder. Additionally, they found a packaging tag for a hammer, which was one of the weapons used in the assault. Surveillance footage later confirmed that George and Stevens were seen together at a hardware store, appearing relaxed and laughing while they bought a hammer, gloves, and a knife. What initially seemed random now clearly indicated premeditation. Faced with overwhelming evidence, Stevens admitted his guilt. He revealed that George had given him $600 in advance and promised to pay him thousands more once the job was completed. For several weeks, they had planned the murder meticulously. Phone records confirmed their confession, revealing 87 calls between the two in September 2012, including 5 calls made the night before the murder. Stevens stated that George had provided keys to Shauna's house, even recommended that they wear black and break in beforehand. On the night of September 29th, Stevens entered the house, concealed himself in a closet, and waited. As Shauna ascended the stairs, he came out from the shadows. Wearing a ski mask, he hit her with a hammer. When the handle broke, he used the metal head to complete the attack. Afterward, he disappeared into the night. Later, Stevens guided investigators to the location where he had buried the murder weapon, which still had Shauna's blood on it. On October 8th, detectives approached George's family to inform them that he was now a primary suspect in a crime. This news shocked his mother and sister, who found it hard to believe that he could commit such an act. As the pressure mounted, George began to crack. Fearing the police were closing in on him, he drove dangerously through Las Vegas and crashed his car into a concrete barrier without any signs of braking. Authorities suspected it was an end-his-life attempt. Fortunately, he survived the crash while wearing his seatbelt, but he was arrested at the hospital. Both George and Noelle Stevens were charged with murder. In exchange for a lesser sentence, Stevens pleaded guilty and testified against George, avoiding the death penalty. He was sentenced to 42 years in prison. George's trial started in August 2015. Despite his difficult background, history of banned substance use, and ongoing mental health struggles, Stevens became the prosecution's main witness. During his testimony, he described a manipulative friendship with George. He told the court that George often complained about Shauna, expressing anger over her spending and bitterness about their failing marriage. Initially, when George proposed getting rid of Shauna, Stevens found it amusing. However, when the offer reached $5,000, he agreed to it. In truth, Stevens only received $600. During the trial, the defense focused on questioning Stevens' credibility. They highlighted his past, his struggles with addiction to argue he was not trustworthy. They contended that the tools in question were merely bought for home repairs. However, it wasn't solely Stevens' testimony that implicated George. The evidence included surveillance footage, phone records, the presence of Shauna's blood on Stevens' possessions, and a consistent timeline. Together, these elements painted a clear picture of premeditated murder. The prosecution described George as a man fixated on maintaining control, struggling to cope with financial troubles, a failing marriage, and the fear of losing influence over Shauna. While family members testified that he was dedicated and principled, witnesses observed that his previously admired discipline had turned dangerous. The evidence painted a different picture. In 2015, George Taife was found guilty of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison without the chance of parole, along with an additional 81 years for related charges. He later appealed his conviction, claiming that a mix of medications, such as Adderall, estrogen blockers, and painkillers prescribed after a workplace injury, impaired his judgment. In a handwritten confession, he stated that the drugs affected his decision-making. He also contended that his defense attorney failed to address his mental health issues and did not seek a psychiatric evaluation. However, his appeal was denied, and the conviction remained. After the tragedy, the most heartbreaking consequence was Madison, Shauna's daughter, who witnessed the aftermath of her mother's murder. She now lives with Shauna's mother, away from the man who tried to ruin their lives. From this unimaginable loss, Shauna's family has created something powerful, Justice for Shauna, a campaign aimed at raising awareness about domestic abuse and manipulation. Shauna's story serves as a cautionary tale about love that turned dangerous, trust that was betrayed, and a justice system that, despite its flaws, eventually uncovered the truth. At the heart of it all is the memory of a vibrant woman who loved deeply and deserved so much more. In 2020, the story of a young British woman named Angel Lynn shocked the entire United Kingdom. She had been stuck in a harmful relationship with a man involved in crime who faced serious legal issues. Whenever Angel tried to leave, the situation worsened. During her last attempt to escape, it turned into a kidnapping and a life-threatening incident. Thankfully, Angel survived, but her life now is very different. Angel Lynn was born in a suburb of Loughborough, Leicestershire in England Midlands. She was the youngest daughter in a family of 6 children. Her parents, Patrick, often called Paddy by friends, and Nikki, were ordinary people. Patrick operated a small retail business, while Nikki dedicated herself to managing the household and caring for their children. Although the Lynn family was not wealthy, their business provided a steady income to meet their basic needs. They lived in a spacious and comfortable home, working hard to ensure their children received a good education. Angel had a strong, loving bond with her family, especially with her mother, Nikki. She confided in her mom about everything, her future plans, dreams, and concerns. From a young age, Angel was very energetic. She excelled in school, participated in sports, and had many friends. Others viewed her as ambitious, principled, someone who stood up for what was right. She aspired to attend college to study law and work in the justice system. Angel was well known for her stunning looks and slender. With her bright blonde hair, deep blue eyes, she always drew attention and brightened up any event. Many people admired her, but she seldom went on dates due to her busy schedule. Angel cherished her independence and was committed to being self-sufficient. While still in high school, she worked part-time as a waitress at a local fast food restaurant. She diligently saved money for college and bought her own clothes, makeup, and personal items. After finishing high school, Angel successfully entered her dream college. She chose to become a crime scene investigator and enrolled in a program to help her reach that goal. She juggled her studies, work, and sports with impressive energy. Everything was going smoothly until she met a young man named Che Boskill, who took everything away from her. Che Boskill was the younger son of his mother. He grew up with his older half-brother. His mother single-handedly raised the boys, as neither of their father was involved in their lives. She worked multiple jobs from early morning to late at night to support them, which meant that money was always tight. Because she was rarely home, she spent little time with the boys, leaving them to take care of themselves in less than ideal living conditions. Che exhibited aggressive behavior from a young age, causing concern among those around him. He frequently had outbursts of anger, got into fights, and faced continuous trouble. As a teenager, he encountered legal issues and was arrested multiple times. Despite this, his mother always intervened to defend him, viewing her younger son as nearly perfect, despite his actions. His older brother also faced legal troubles, but Che ultimately became a more serious offender while still in school. Nevertheless, their mother did not see any issue with their behavior and did not view them as a bad person. At only 15 years old, Che got involved in crime. He began by stealing cars and taking them apart for parts. Soon after, he joined a local gang where he quickly built a reputation, found his role. It's important to mention that Che was following his brother's path. However, his brother was less aggressive and better at managing his anger. Che loved motorcycles and cars, but instead of just driving, he sped down the streets at high speeds. He obtained his driver's license and, for some time, drove cars for his friends in the gang. By the age of 18, he had purchased his own car with money earned from illegal activities. He frequently drove while under the influence of alcohol and banned substance. On one occasion, he caused a serious accident by crashing into a utility pole, which resulted in him being hospitalized. Although he lost his driver's license, he continued to drive stolen cars and even live-streamed his dangerous driving around town. As Che became more entrenched in organized crime, he escalated from minor crimes like petty theft and carjackings to more severe offenses, including robbery and banned substance dealing. He and his associates began to steal luxury cars on demand and targeted affluent individuals. Che took pride in being a bad guy. Despite being arrested multiple times, he consistently managed to evade significant penalties, often receiving only light sentences. Che had a captivating appearance and a charming personality, despite his reckless behavior and self-destructive lifestyle. Even as a teenager, he easily attracted the attention of girls. When his illegal activities started making money, he spent it lavishly to impress those he liked. However, his bad temper and aggressive nature prevented him from maintaining any meaningful relationships. Che was a manipulative bully who wasn't afraid to resort to violence. While he could initially charm a girl, most would leave once they recognized his true nature. Unfortunately, not everyone was fortunate enough to get away. In early 2019, Angel met a man while spending time with mutual friends. They were both the same age and attended the same university, quickly discovering that they had much in common. Their immediate chemistry led to a budding friendship that soon blossomed into a romantic relationship. Within a few weeks, they introduced each other to their families, indicating that they were serious about their commitment. Hattie and Nikki were pleased with their daughter's choice, as her boyfriend came from a good family and was a decent person. Similarly, his parents welcomed Angel warmly. They spent a lot of time at each other's homes. Their friends and family often joked about a possible wedding in the future. Just 6 months into their intense relationship, they unexpectedly broke up for unclear reasons. Her boyfriend initiated the breakup, leaving Angel feeling heartbroken. Shortly after, he began dating someone new, prompting Angel to distance herself from mutual friends to avoid seeing them together. She found herself isolated, without her boyfriend or friends. Though her family supported her, she fell deeper into sadness. Even focusing on her studies and work didn't provide much relief. During a challenging period in her life, Angel met someone who would become very important to her. By chance, she crossed paths with Che. He was immediately taken with her beauty. He approached her, asked why she seemed sad, suggested they take a walk and get coffee. Angel needed someone to confide in, and Che proved to be a surprisingly good listener. They exchanged phone numbers, quickly began talking and meeting regularly. Che made an effort to impress her with his kindness and support. Before long, Angel realized she was developing feelings for him. At that moment, she truly believed she had found someone deserving of her time, effort. Che tried to impress Angel by showering her with expensive gifts. He taking her to trendy clubs, restaurants, and concerts. She wanted to learn more about his job, but he was very good at concealing his illegal activities. One evening, Angel invited him to dinner at her parents' house. What was supposed to be a warm family meal turned into a heated argument due to Che's arrogant behavior, which upset Angel's parents. Afterward, Nikki, Angel's mother, expressed her concerns about Che and urged Angel to end the relationship. To avoid upsetting her parents, Angel told them that she and Che were just friends, promised to spend less time with him. However, Angel and Che continued their secret relationship, never thinking about breaking up. Che made reservations at fancy hotels for their romantic evenings together. Angel felt she was with a good man, she had fallen in love with him. Che was still in frequent contact with his girlfriend. They called each other many times a day and sent constant texts. He often inquired about her whereabouts, activities, companions. Trusting him, Angel shared everything, believing this was his way of showing he cared. Unfortunately, this was actually the start of his controlling and manipulative behavior. In just a few months, Che learned everything about Angel, her whereabouts, her friends, her work and school schedules. He earned her trust and started to distance her from friends he didn't like. He pressured Angel to lie to her parents, creating a rift between her and her family. By August 2019, his control grew stronger. He dictated her clothing choices, restricted her conversations, even banned her from wearing makeup. Che regularly checked her phone, deleting contacts he disapproved of. He constantly monitored her, questioning her about unplanned outings and showing up if she was out longer than usual. The situation escalated to the point where Angel couldn't greet a male acquaintance without provoking a fierce argument. Her parents started to notice significant changes in her behavior. Once lively, cheerful, Angel became pale and withdrawn. She stopped wearing makeup, started dressing in baggy clothes, and seemed constantly anxious. She became secretive, always clutching her phone and hurrying away to be alone whenever it rang. Her conversations with her mother and sisters dwindled, leading them to become suspicious. When anyone asked how she was doing, she insisted everything was fine, but her reassurances sounded less convincing each time. As a result, the distance grew between Angel and her family. Che took control of her life, turning her from a vibrant young woman into someone isolated and invisible, who believed her only worth was to him. Che began to control every part of Angel's life, even trying to persuade her to quit school and work, promising to handle everything for her. Despite this, Angel was determined to pursue her dreams. Che's control grew stronger. He accessed her social media accounts, installed a tracking app on her phone. He monitored her every move and conversation. He could appear anywhere at any time, which made Angel feel constantly anxious, on edge. Under his pressure, Angel got a tattoo of his name on her arm, as if he had branded her as his own. Che treated her like property. He would call her multiple times a day, even at night, insisting that she turn on her camera so he could see where she was and who was with her. Angel reached her breaking point, tried to end the relationship several times, but Che refused to let her go. What started as a romantic relationship turned into pure manipulation. Che effectively stalked her, controlling her every action, all under the guise of love and concern. In January 2020, Che and several friends were arrested for trying to steal a car, received 4-month prison sentences. For Angel, this seemed like an opportunity to break free from a toxic relationship that was going nowhere. However, she was wrong. Every day, Che was allowed to make a phone call, and he used it each evening to contact Angel. His friends watched her and reported back to him. Angel felt constantly monitored and powerless to escape her fear. At the end of May, Che was released from prison. He immediately went to Angel's house and caused a scene. When Angel tried to break up with him again, he demanded that she pay him back about £80, which he claimed to have spent on her before he was imprisoned. Angel quickly gave him all the money she had saved, but the harassment worsened. A week later, Che physically attacked Angel for the first time. Just a week after that, he assaulted her again, and a bystander, concerned for Angel's safety, called the police. However, Angel chose not to press charges, so Che faced no repercussions. On July 9, 2020, a neighbor of Che's called the police because he heard a woman screaming for help. At that time, Che had pinned Angel to the ground and hit her head against the floor. Although Angel needed medical help afterward, she did not report the incident. In the following months, she continued to experience psychological and physical abuse from Che. Fearful of what Che might do to her or her family, she remained silent about the situation and tried to endure it, even though she realized it couldn't last forever. In September of that year, Angel made the difficult decision to end her relationship for good. Che reacted strongly, physically attacking her, leaving her with scrapes and significant bruises on her face. After the incident, he appeared to calm down, even apologized, vowing to be more respectful in the future. However, Angel believed he wouldn't genuinely change and pushed to end the relationship entirely. She felt certain that the toughest and most dangerous challenges were still ahead, but she was prepared to face them. Che, after making several attempts to win Angel back, proposed that they should at least stay friends. Angel agreed, thinking that if he believed they were still on good terms, he might lose interest in her, stop pursuing her. On September 17, 2020, Angel went to work, later committed to picking up Che and his friend Rocco Sansom in their van. They frequently relied on her as their driver, especially when they were too drunk or under the influence of substances to drive themselves. That day was no exception. Angel arrived at the designated parking lot, where the van was parked. Che and Rocco were waiting. Once everyone was inside the van, they drove off. Angel and Che had a heated argument while driving. She pulled over, stopped the vehicle, and jumped out, running away quickly. This incident was recorded by street surveillance cameras. In the footage, Che can be seen angrily chasing after her. He catches her and forces her back into the van before taking the driver's seat himself. The vehicle then sped away, completely disregarding traffic laws. This situation amounted to a kidnapping, as Angel was trapped inside the van with two men. She was clearly terrified. It's unclear what she experienced during that time. In the next 15 minutes, the police received numerous reports about a suspicious van speeding away from town, with the driver behaving erratically. However, officers couldn't respond in time before a tragic event occurred. Suddenly, the passenger door of the van flew open, and Angel fell out at high speed, narrowly avoiding being struck by two cars following closely behind. Fortunately, the drivers reacted quickly and stopped their vehicles. They rushed to her aid. Someone called the police. Meanwhile, the van continued for about 100 kilometers per hour as if nothing had happened, then slowed down and returned to the scene. To any onlookers, it might have appeared that the driver had simply dropped something small and returned to retrieve it. Che approached the gathering calmly, told those present that the injured young woman was his girlfriend, that they had just argued. He said he wanted to break up with her and that she had lost control, attempting to jump out of the moving van. However, his account seemed unconvincing. He stayed on the scene, waited for the medics and police to arrive, repeating his story verbatim. It was evident that he believed Angel wouldn't survive. He seemed to be shifting all the blame onto her. His friend Rocco, who was also in the van, supported his version of events, mirroring his words. Despite her severe injuries, Angel was still breathing when she was rushed to the nearest hospital by ambulance. Unfortunately, the chances of saving her were low. She had broken ribs, broken limbs, a compression fracture in her spine, and many cuts, bruises. The most critical injury was a traumatic brain injury that led to significant bleeding in her brain. For several days, doctors fought tirelessly to save her life. She underwent multiple complex surgeries, including one to remove part of her skull to relieve pressure on her brain. Her heart stopped several times, and she was clinically dead on those occasions, but the medical team was able to revive her each time. Eventually, Angel was placed in a medically induced coma and put on life support. Her chances of waking up were nearly non-existent. The doctors were astonished that she had survived the initial accident, but their outlook was bleak. They warned the Lin family that, even if she miraculously survived and could breathe independently, she would likely remain bedridden and in a permanent vegetative state. They suggested considering the option of disconnecting her from the costly life support machines, but her parents refused to even think about it. Che and Rocco were held at the scene and taken to the police station for questioning. They both insisted they had done nothing wrong, claiming that Angel was out of control and that the incident stemmed from her attempts to take her own life. However, security camera footage showed a different reality. Che was charged with kidnapping, unlawful imprisonment, causing serious physical harm. Rocco was arrested as an accomplice. Both remained in jail while waiting for their court appearances. The trial started in January 2022, with new charges of assault and harassment added. The defendants did not admit guilt. The prosecutors failed to provide clear evidence that Angel was intentionally thrown from the moving van. As a result, the jury could not come to a unanimous verdict, leading to the defendants receiving relatively light sentences. Rocco was sentenced to just 21 months in prison for his involvement, while Che received a 7-year sentence. The Attorney General referred Che Bauskil's sentence to the Court of Appeal under the lenient sentences scheme. In March 2022, the court increased his sentence to 12 years. However, Che will still be eligible for parole after serving 8 years. Despite the doctor's discouraging predictions, Angel continued to fight for her life. Although she suffered significant brain damage, she eventually began to breathe on her own. After a few months, the doctors lifted her from the medically induced coma. Initially, she did not recognize anyone, could not control her movements, and needed to be fed through a tube. There were no indications that she was aware of her surroundings. Meanwhile, Angel's cousin, Farron Davis, has set up a GoFundMe page to help her recover from the horrific incident. Kind strangers and members of her community have donated nearly £200,000, which will be used to renovate the family home, as they have received no assistance from the council. Angel is now doing well and will soon be able to move out of the flat and live with her family once the construction work is complete. Her sister, Rhiannon, is planning to move nearby from Newcastle so she can join her mother in looking after her. In the spring of 2022, her parents brought her home to care for her themselves. A year later, in May 2023, Angel amazed everyone by starting to respond to her environment. Just a month after that, she looked at her mom, Nikki, and called out, "Mom." Now, Angel Lynn is going through a lengthy rehabilitation process, has even begun to take her first steps. Although the doctors are skeptical about her returning to her previous life, her parents refuse to accept that possibility because their daughter has shown time and again that she is a fighter. On April 4, 2015, emergency services received a disturbing call from a local resident. A frightened man reported to the dispatcher that he went into his friend's living room to turn on the lights and check on him. However, when he went upstairs to the second floor, he found blood everywhere. The caller said everything was covered in blood, and his injured friend was not breathing. When the police arrived, they were shocked to discover the brutal murder of 59-year-old Charles Taylor in the unincorporated community of Montgomery County. The crime scene was horrifying. Blood was splattered on the carpet, the walls, and the sofa where Charles lay, completely soaked in it. The violent nature of the crime suggested deep anger. The attackers seemed determined to not only kill Charles but also to inflict as much pain as possible by stabbing him repeatedly with a sharp knife. The investigation of the house revealed no signs of forced entry, indicating that the perpetrator was familiar with the residents and acted quickly. The forensic medical examination determined that Charles died from blunt force trauma to the back of his head, along with 31 stab wounds. Charles was known as a kind and generous individual. He had a strong relationship with his adult son. He cherished his 2 grandchildren and daughter-in-law, Amanda Taylor. This is the image of the family that people often see, leading them to believe everything was well. However, was this truly the reality within the Taylor family? The initial investigation progressed slowly because the police had few leads. They started by looking into Charles's friends and acquaintances but found no one who had a motive to harm him. Soon, a theory emerged suggesting that the culprit might be a family member of Taylor. Investigators caught a break when a crime blogger came forward with photos of Amanda Taylor taking selfies next to Charles's lifeless body. As a result, she was added to the wanted list. Amanda Barbara Nicole Taylor was born on March 27, 1991, in Christiansburg, Virginia. There is limited information about her childhood, but it was difficult because both of her parents were incarcerated. Amanda faced many personal challenges as a young girl. Her involvement in crime began after she met Mariah Roebuck. The two of them frequently got into trouble together. On October 23, 2005, when they were only 12 years old, Amanda and Mariah stole a car and ran away from home, leading to charges of unauthorized use of a motor vehicle. In early April 2006, Amanda was charged with disorderly conduct at her middle school for loudly expressing her hatred for the school and its students, including making threats. This incident was much more serious than typical teenage behavior and is just a small part of Amanda's legal troubles. In 9th grade, she began dating Rex Taylor, who was 2 years her senior. They shared the same birthday, March 27th, which they saw as a meaningful connection. Amanda dropped out of school when she found out she was pregnant. She and Rex got married and had a son, but becoming a mother did not curb Amanda's criminal behavior. Amanda Taylor's married life was marked by numerous legal troubles. Her police record expanded significantly with reports of another attempted escape after stealing a vehicle, a conviction for alcohol possession, several domestic disputes, and a charge for holding a controlled substance. Her husband, Rex Taylor, also came from a troubled background. Although they were devoted to each other, Rex faced serious challenges with addiction and depression, having been addicted to banned substance since he was 15. They had a daughter. At one point, it seemed Amanda had turned her life around, becoming a dedicated mother and wife. This was in contrast to many young American women who expressed themselves through piercings, tattoos, and social media selfies. However, Amanda and Rex's relationship was far from typical. They obsessively studied the lives of infamous serial criminals and even corresponded with them while they were in prison. Amanda began to fantasize about joining the ranks of criminals herself, but before she could pursue that dark path, tragedy struck. Their marriage was complicated by Amanda's fears of Rex's infidelity. In April 2014, they separated. Rex returned to the family home, where he resumed using banned substance. Tragically, 4 months later, his lifeless body was found in a shed on their property. He had taken his own life on the day of their child's 7th birthday. After Amanda's husband passed away, she occasionally stayed with her mother and her friend Mariah. During her time with Mariah, she also formed a friendship with Sean Ball, a member of the Roebuck family. On March 27, 2015, which was her birthday and her late husband's birthday, Amanda visited Rex's grave and attempted to take her own life. Fortunately, she was saved and admitted to a psychiatric hospital due to her troubling thoughts and actions that posed a risk to herself and others. Despite her mother wanting her to stay for a longer period of treatment, Amanda was released back home shortly after. Once Amanda returned home, her mental state deteriorated further. As a result, Mariah and her husband decided that it was best for Amanda to move out. They also asked Sean Ball to leave, as he had developed strong feelings for Amanda. Feeling abandoned by her friends during this challenging time, Amanda began to entertain dark thoughts about killing. This disturbing mindset was influenced by her late husband, Rex Taylor, whom she wanted to honor and make proud. Amanda believed that fulfilling this twisted sense of duty required taking someone's life. Rex had a fascination with serial killers and had even formed close connections with some during his lifetime. Imagine stepping outside your house one morning to check your mailbox and discovering an envelope addressed to you from a famous serial criminal who was caught in 1980. Inside the envelope, you would feel relieved to find a birthday card for your young child and a handwritten note. Some might say that receiving such a message is worrying. Regardless, for most people, getting anything in the mail from a serial criminal would be unsettling, but not for the Taylor family. Rex's behavior and his readiness to communicate with known serial criminals, along with Amanda's fascination with crime, have been underscored by disturbing details found in her past social media posts. In multiple posts, Amanda praised mass murderers and their violent acts, specifically mentioning Timothy McVeigh, who orchestrated the largest terrorist attack in U.S. history, as well as Dylan Klebold and Eric Harris, the shooters responsible for the Columbine High School massacre. She expressed a desire to emulate these cruel criminals and chose to embark on a criminal path herself. On April 4, 2015, Amanda went to Charles's home in Montgomery County, Virginia, with Sean, who had picked her up in his car earlier that day. Together, the two purchased a bayonet-shaped knife. They also brought a tire iron that Sean had hidden in his pants, along with several guns, including 2 pistols and a rifle. These weapons had been stolen from Sean's parents' home. Amanda later admitted that they had gone to Charles's home with the intention of killing him. During the visit, the conversation turned to Rex Taylor, Amanda's late husband, who had committed to end one's own life in August 2014. Amanda blamed Charles for Rex's end one's own life, believing that he was responsible for Rex's banned substance abuse, which had become particularly problematic in the 2 years prior to his death. While Charles was sitting on the sofa, Amanda began stabbing him repeatedly while standing over him. Charles reached for the knife. As he did so, Sean swung the tire iron and struck him 5 or 6 times, while Amanda continued to stab him. Charles's autopsy later revealed that he had been stabbed 31 times and had suffered blunt force trauma to the head. Some of the stab wounds were so forceful that they completely penetrated his neck and arms. For Amanda, this was a personal act of revenge. She finally stopped when her anger began to fade, and the room was covered in blood. However, she went even further by taking a selfie next to his body and sharing it on her social media accounts. Later that day, Amanda's mother received a troubling phone call from an unknown number. To her shock, it was Amanda's voice on the line, crying as she expressed her deep love for her mother and how much she appreciated everything her mom had done for her. Amidst her tears, Amanda admitted that she had done something very serious. Sensing the urgency of the situation, Her mother pleaded for her to come home. However, Amanda declined. The authorities were taken aback by her social media posts, which suggested she was surprisingly proud of her actions related to the incident. In hopes of addressing the situation quickly, the police issued an arrest warrant for her. However, by that time, Amanda and Sean had already fled. They weren't just fleeing, they were looking for their next victim. After Amanda committed her first crime, which she believed was flawless, she felt an uncontrollable urge to keep killing. At a gas station, they took out cash, filled the car with gas, and headed towards Tennessee. Sean urged Amanda to pause and hide for a while, but having experienced the thrill of violence, Amanda was set on committing another crime. They bought ammunition at a sporting goods store and then stayed overnight at a motel in Tennessee. The next day, they continued their journey to carry out Amanda's violent plan. While driving, Amanda spotted two young girls at a rest stop on Blue Ridge Parkway, whom she saw as potential victims. She informed Sean that she intended to bring the girls to the car so he could shoot them. They needed money, and he consented. Amanda went outside to lead the girls to the car, but when she brought them inside, Sean refused to shoot them. Enraged, Amanda got back in the car and drove away, unable to calm her anger. She stopped in the driveway and confronted Sean, who was now her target. Amanda pulled a revolver from the glove compartment, got out of the car, and approached the passenger side where Sean sat with his eyes closed in fear. Anger overwhelmed her, but then she noticed a jogger nearby. In a sudden move, she aimed the gun at him and fired. Luckily, she missed, and the gunshot startled Sean open his eyes. Realizing the threat he faced, he saw the revolver aimed at him. Amanda warned him that before she killed him, she wanted him to know she only used him for the gun and the car. Then, she pulled the trigger, shooting Sean in the face. Amanda took a picture of Sean's bloody face to share on social media and then drove away, leaving him bleeding from a gunshot wound on the side of the road. Now she was on the run by herself. The police were searching for her, yet Amanda continued to post updates online. In her next post, she confessed to taking Sean's life during a traffic stop in a field. She shared a photo of a silver revolver resting in her lap on Instagram, captioning it with what felt like a suicide note, "Okay, it's about that time. I'm going to find my husband in hell and finally find peace. I love you, Mom, and my beautiful children. I know you will provide them the life I could never give. I will finally be free." The police were closely monitoring Amanda's account in hopes of locating her, and they succeeded. Surveillance cameras from gas stations along the route taken by the white SUV in which she fled helped the police track her down. Additionally, cell tower signals pinpointed Amanda's location on a North Carolina state highway. Patrol officers spotted a white SUV traveling east on I-40 near Asheville. When they attempted to pull her over, Amanda resisted arrest. Law enforcement was on high alert, aware that she was armed and considered very dangerous. After a 2-mile stretch filled with strategically placed spikes, the chaos finally came to an end. Amanda was taken into custody around 8 the next morning. Police officers pulled her out of the car and handcuffed her. Meanwhile, paramedics discovered Sean, injured, on the side of the road. In the interrogation room, Amanda acted indifferently, sipping a soft drink and playing with her hair until the captain and another detective entered. When questioned, she waived her right to remain silent and confessed to everything. She seemed surprisingly comfortable in the presence of the investigators. Amanda was informed that Sean was not dead. The bullet had passed through his jaw, causing him to faint from the pain but leaving him with no lasting injuries. In a startling statement, Amanda expressed her desire to go to the death chamber. In a surprising twist, Amanda changed her plea to not guilty in court. During the trial, she described her crime in detail, claiming she was justified in killing Charles, who had taken Rex away from her. Initially, she was furious with Rex, but her anger soon turned toward his father. Amanda confessed that she wanted Charles to feel the same pain she had endured. She claimed she killed Charles because she held him responsible for her husband Rex's death. According to Amanda, when Charles mentioned Rex again, she looked at him and began stabbing him. She acknowledged that she felt a strange happiness during those moments of violence. Ultimately, Amanda unleashed all her pent-up hatred and anger. By not pleading guilty, she sought attention and an opportunity to discuss her case. The investigator found Amanda's explanation appalling, especially since she likened her feelings about the crime to a happy memory. On November 12, 2015, Amanda Taylor was convicted of first-degree murder for the brutal killing of Charles Taylor. She was sentenced to life in prison, with the judge describing her as the embodiment of evil. As part of a plea bargain, Sean Ball acknowledged that he did not deserve sympathy and expressed deep remorse for his actions. Yet, he carries a constant guilt, pondering what led to his situation. Sean Ball accepted a plea deal for second-degree murder, receiving a 60-year sentence with 19 years suspended, requiring him to serve 41 years. He expressed deep remorse for his role in the crime. Amanda recently appealed her conviction but was unsuccessful. She mentioned that she plans to take her appeal to the Supreme Court if needed. While Amanda is not a repeat offender, she gained a reputation as a killer selfie taker. During this time, she surprisingly gave a phone interview to a local reporter, where she compared the experience of being stabbed to riding a roller coaster. Amanda Taylor committed a serious crime, and many people who knew her described her as a dark and troubling individual who had been obsessed with death, crime, and serial offenders since she was young. Her social media accounts were filled with disturbing images of death scenes. It was a warm summer morning in Melbourne, Australia, on Sunday, February 13, 2005. While most people were making plans for Valentine's Day, the city's attention was focused on something far more serious: a missing woman. Her face had become familiar across news broadcasts. Her name was Maria Korp, and she had been gone for 4 days. That morning, a park caretaker made his way to work at King's Domain along Dallas Brooks Drive. He normally didn't work on Sundays, but a routine inspection of the water tanks had brought him in. After wrapping up his checks, he stopped by a nearby cafe for coffee. That was when he noticed something odd: a red Mazda parked nearby. The color and make matched the car described in the media all week. Curious and increasingly uneasy, he walked over to the vehicle. The front seats were cluttered, with papers strewn everywhere and a stale bread roll left behind. The doors were locked. Nothing seemed forcibly entered, but the scene felt wrong, too quiet, too abandoned. He made the call to the police. When officers arrived, they verified what the caretaker suspected: the car was registered to Maria Korp, the woman who had vanished without a trace days earlier. Just after 1 p.m., forensic technicians began their search. From the outside, it looked like any other parked car until they opened the trunk. Inside, they found a woman, pale, injured, and completely still. It was Maria. There was no movement or signs of life. And then, suddenly, she breathed. Against all odds, Maria was still alive, but barely. She had endured what no one should: days trapped inside the scorching trunk of a car without food or water, suffering serious head injuries and with no way to call for help. By then, the heat of the Australian summer had turned the vehicle into an oven. Every second she survived in that space defied explanation. Maria was immediately taken to the hospital. Doctors determined she had suffered a traumatic brain injury, dehydration, and a dangerous lack of oxygen to her brain. She was placed in an induced coma and hooked up to life support. Her condition was critical. What led Maria Korp to that? Who wanted her gone? And could she survive long enough to tell the world what really happened? Maria's story began far from the busy streets of Melbourne, in a small, rugged village on the Portuguese island of Madeira. Born on January 14, 1955, she was one of 12 children in a devout Catholic family that lived high in the hills, surrounded by farmland and faith. Life was hard. The home had no plumbing, the toilet was outside, and the nearest hospital was hours away, likely unreachable without a car. Despite these challenges, the family was self-sufficient. They owned land, ran a productive farm, raised their children with discipline and devotion. Maria, like her siblings, worked in the fields and followed the rhythm of village life. She was gentle, quiet, never dreamed of much beyond what she knew: marriage, motherhood, and religion. Her heart had already chosen the boy next door. They were young and in love, planning a life together. Her family approved, his did not. Then tragedy struck. He was sent away for military service and never returned. He died before turning 20. The grief changed Maria. She often said she would never love anyone as deeply again. But her parents had other plans. They arranged a marriage for her with a man. At 19, Maria married a man she barely knew. They soon left Madeira in search of a better life. In 1975, they immigrated to Australia, settling in the suburbs of Melbourne. They both found work in a local factory. Maria adapted quickly. She learned English, adjusted to the culture, and found her footing in this unfamiliar land. Her husband, on the other hand, never settled. He disliked their new life and longed to return home, but Maria refused. Australia was their future. In 1978, they welcomed their daughter, Laura de Gois. They bought a modest home and lived simply. But in 1987, disaster struck again. Her husband died unexpectedly of a heart attack. He wasn't even 40. Maria, who was only 32, became a widow and a single mother overnight. With no time to mourn, she went back to work to provide for her daughter. She kept going, step by step, day after day. Somehow, she endured. Eventually, Maria found a second chance at love while working in a tire factory. There, she met Joe Corp, an Australian-born man who was 3 years younger and full of charm. He brought laughter back into her life. However, there was a significant issue. Joe was already married with children. Despite this, he was determined to win Maria over. Although she held strong religious beliefs and principles, her loneliness and hope gradually weakened her ability to resist him. Joe promised that he would leave his wife. Eventually, he did. His decision surprised his family. In front of his children, Joe told his wife that he was leaving her for another woman. While she had suspected infidelity, she never anticipated the public humiliation that followed. By 1991, Joe's marriage had officially ended, and within a few months, he married Maria. In 1994, they had a son named Damien. They lived with Maria's daughter, Laura, in a peaceful suburb of Melbourne. To the people around them, they appeared to be a happy couple. Maria's family believed she had found a sense of peace in her new relationship. They often remarked that Maria loved Joe just as much as she had loved her previous husband. They frequently traveled to Portugal, bringing gifts for Maria's relatives, such as household appliances and electronics, anything they needed, thanks to Joe's support. Some of Maria's siblings thought he was showing off, while others appreciated his generosity. In their eyes, Joe had become the favored son-in-law. Beneath the surface of their quiet home life, things were not as they appeared. Joe had a complicated past. Before Maria, he had relationships with other women. While married, he was unfaithful and even boasted to his brother about his affairs. His ex-wife later shared that he was very controlling, discouraging her from working and telling her what to wear, all while pretending to care. Joe always wanted everything to go his way. Joe was born in 1958, was one of 5 siblings in a typical Australian family. He performed well in school, enjoyed sports, but when he enlisted in the military in 1976, he struggled to adapt and left after less than a year. The tough conditions led him to skip duties to watch cricket matches or spend time with his girlfriend. In 1977, he married, and he had 2 children. Joe worked at a tire factory and eventually became a manager. On the surface, he seemed like a dedicated family man, but he had his secrets. When Maria entered his life, it wasn't just another fling. He decided to be with her for good. Together, they built a new life. Maria continued to work, take care of her children, support her family, and serve her church, while Joe became her partner and a source of strength. However, their relationship had hidden problems. At first, the issues were minor and easy to overlook, but over time, they expanded into something much more serious, leading to a shocking incident. After years of saving, they started building their dream home, a spacious 5-bedroom house featuring a home cinema, a beautiful garden, a large walk-in wardrobe, and a garage for 3 cars. It was more than Maria had ever hoped for, all made possible through years of discipline and careful budgeting. When the house was finally completed, Maria felt a deep sense of pride. To the outside world, her life seemed perfect: a loving husband, 2 children, and a big home. Beneath the surface of their seemingly perfect marriage, the once passionate relationship between Joe and Maria had started to fade. Joe developed new interests that Maria struggled to comprehend, particularly in their intimate life. As a result, she became more emotionally distant. Seeking solace, she found refuge in church and eventually stopped sharing a bed with him altogether. They began sleeping in separate rooms, growing further apart. While Maria sought comfort in her faith, Joe escaped into a fantasy world. He constructed a secret online identity as a construction business owner who was separated from his wife and looking for someone to pamper. His profile presented an enticing image, attracting responses from various women. Initially, their conversations were innocent, but things quickly changed. Joe began meeting women in person and having short-term relationships while lying about many parts of his life. As he spent more time online, he spent less time at home, which Maria noticed. In September 2003, she shared her concerns with her daughter, Laura, who was now an adult, expressing her suspicion that Joe was being unfaithful. Maria started to observe him more closely, and her fears were confirmed when she found intimate messages and receipts from motels. The argument that ensued was intense. Joe denied any wrongdoing and turned the blame onto Maria. He claimed she was emotionally unavailable, always praying, and frequently on the phone with her sisters. This infuriated Maria. She briefly thought about divorce but hesitated due to her religious beliefs. Instead, she decided to fight for their marriage. Determined to win Joe back, Maria made significant changes in her life. She started a diet, refreshed her wardrobe, and even agreed to join him at swinger clubs, actions that were completely out of character for her. She hoped this would rekindle their bond. However, nothing improved. Joe continued his affairs, often stayed out late, and the lies persisted. By early 2005, Maria had reached her breaking point. She threatened to leave, changed the locks, and kicked Joe out. This time, Joe took her seriously. He promised to change, said he would end his affairs, and wanted to start anew. For a brief moment, it seemed like they could reconcile. Maria even told her friends that things were looking up. But then came Wednesday, February 9, 2005. The day started like any other. Maria and Joe woke up early to get ready for work, both of them working at different factories. Around 6:30 a.m., Maria left the house, followed shortly by Joe. Their daughter Laura was still living with them but had a later start time for her job and was still asleep when they left. Everything appeared normal until midday. The school called to inform that their son, Damien, had not been picked up. It was Maria's responsibility to pick him up every day, but no one could reach her. Confused, Joe went to collect Damien himself. He wondered if he had misunderstood or if Maria had asked him for help and he'd forgotten. However, when he returned home, Maria was still missing. As night fell, she had yet to return. Calls to her phone went unanswered, and none of her friends had seen or heard from her. The situation became even more alarming when they discovered that Maria had not shown up for work and had not called in sick. There were no messages or explanations. Maria was not the kind of person to just disappear. That evening, Joe reported Maria missing. The authorities responded immediately. By the next morning, her disappearance was all over the news. Her photo and a description of her missing red Mazda were broadcast on TV and printed in newspapers. The community anxiously hoped for updates. However, what no one realized was that a dark and troubling truth was already visible. Time was quickly running out. The breakthrough in the case occurred just 4 days after Maria disappeared. A city worker found her Mazda parked near King's Domain in Melbourne. It appeared to be an ordinary car until investigators checked the boot. Inside, they discovered Maria crumpled and motionless. She was alive but in critical condition. Doctors identified a severe head injury, but the real concern was the trauma to her neck, indicating someone had attempted to strangle her, cutting off her oxygen for long enough to cause permanent harm. Believing she was dead, the attacker had stuffed her into the boot of her own car. She endured 4 days in that sealed space without water, food, or airflow during the peak of the Australian summer. She was quickly taken to the hospital, put into an induced coma, and connected to machines. Doctors estimated she had only a 25% chance of survival due to severe oxygen deprivation, which had caused significant brain damage that might be irreversible. While the medical team worked hard to save her life, detectives were looking into a different issue: who had tried to kill Maria. They didn't need to look far for a suspect. Before she went missing, Maria had prepared for a potential crisis. She had given a close friend a bag containing printed emails, hotel receipts, and proof of her husband's cheating. "If anything happens to her," she said, "please give this to the police." The warnings didn't come without reason. Maria had been regularly visiting a psychic, and one of them warned her that she was in danger. The warning was clear: her husband might be involved. Maria took this seriously, and she wasn't alone in her concerns. Joe's brother, Gust, also had doubts early on in the search. Gust feared something terrible might have already happened to his sister-in-law. Additionally, Maria's daughter, Laura, recalled something unsettling. On the night Maria was attacked, February 9th, Laura suddenly woke up in the middle of the night and thought she heard her mother scream. When she went downstairs, she found Joe there, calm and smiling. He told her that Maria had just had a bad dream. Uncertain, Laura returned to bed. It was only later that she would start to question whether that scream was the moment her mother's life was in jeopardy. Joe had a solid alibi: he was at work all day, as confirmed by his co-workers. He picked up his son from school and showed real concern when Maria didn't return home. His timeline seemed perfect, but the police had doubts. While they believed Joe may not have directly harmed Maria, they thought he could have been involved in planning it. Soon, investigators uncovered another person of interest, a woman named Tanya Herman. Tanya Herman's story began in 1966. She was born into a traditional working-class Catholic family as one of 4 children. Her childhood was normal: she enjoyed sports, was friendly, often dreamed of love and weddings. At 21, she married in 1987, but her husband was abusive, leading to a difficult divorce. Her next relationship ended in betrayal, but it also brought her a daughter, whom she raised by herself. To support her family, Tanya held various office jobs, worked early shifts, and eventually moved to Melbourne for a fresh start. During this time, she worked as a waitress at a club, where she met Mr. Herman, a sailor. They got married and had a daughter, but unfortunately, that marriage also did not last. By 2002, Tanya was single, struggling to raise her 2 children. To earn some money, she began babysitting kids in her neighborhood. However, her babysitting job ended in scandal when several parents accused her of locking children in a room, and one child even broke their leg. These allegations forced her out of work. Her relationship with her teenage daughter worsened. At just 13 years old, her daughter chose to live with her father. As a result, Tanya became isolated and both financially and emotionally exhausted. She began spending time in online chat rooms. In late 2003, she met a man named Joe, who claimed to be a separated business owner looking for a fresh start and said he had 2 kids. However, the truth was that Joe still married and living with his wife, Maria. Their first meeting in person was in February 2004, and the connection between them was immediate. Tanya was enchanted. Joe seemed to say all the right things and consistently made time for her. He told her he was in the final stages of his divorce. She believed him. By late 2004, they had even rented a house together, just minutes from the home he shared with Maria and his children, of which Tanya was completely unaware. Joe went further by decorating their love nest with furniture similar to that of his marital home. He also enrolled Tanya's daughter in the same school as his own son, a disturbing detail that would only be revealed much later. Joe never moved in with Tanya full-time, despite various excuses. He claimed he was busy with paperwork, finalizing the custody agreement, or waiting for the right moment. However, Tanya began to notice inconsistencies in his stories, and his visits became less frequent. His fabrications, which he had mastered, started to fall apart. When Joe finally admitted that he was still married and that his life was far from what he had described, Tanya was furious. However, her anger quickly faded as her deep love for him took over. She decided to forgive him, but that forgiveness gradually transformed into obsession. Tanya started to follow Maria, observing her at the school gates and memorizing her daily routines. By the end of 2004, Joe was secretly planning to start a new life with his mistress while still living with his wife. His family knew about Tanya, and surprisingly, some even approved of the relationship. They had never liked Maria, likely because their relationship began with cheating. To them, Tanya represented a fresh start. In December of that year, Joe confided in a friend that he was in a new relationship and that his marriage was over. However, Maria remained unaware of this. She still thought they were trying to resolve their issues. What Joe didn't mention was that divorcing Maria meant he would have to divide their assets, including their home and the life they had worked so hard to build together. When police questioned Joe about Maria's disappearance, he confessed to having an affair, but his alibi was strong. In contrast, Tanya did not have an alibi. Detectives began focusing on her when they noticed that she had taken her daughter to school unusually late on the morning Maria disappeared. They brought Tanya in for questioning and searched her home. In the back of her wardrobe, they discovered a pair of sports shoes with red stains that were later confirmed to be blood matching Maria Corp's DNA. Further DNA evidence was found in the Corp family's garage, indicating that the attack likely occurred there. The investigators suspect that, as Maria approached her car, Tanya ambushed her, possibly with Joe's assistance. Once Maria was knocked unconscious, they put her in the trunk of her own car. Tanya then drove away, while Joe went to work, acting as if nothing unusual had occurred. Meanwhile, Tanya's explanation did not add up. She stated that her daughter had simply overslept, which caused her to be late. However, during questioning, detectives observed her nervousness and her frequent mention of Joe. Her tone was affectionate, almost infatuated, revealing that she was willing to do anything for him. Police suspected that both Joe and Tanya were involved in the crime, as they had motives, opportunities. The evidence against them. However, Joe denied any wrongdoing, claiming he was attempting to end the affair. Lacking direct evidence of his guilt, detectives decided to try a different approach. They contacted Tanya's brother and asked him to wear a recording device. This strategy proved successful. During a recorded conversation, Tanya confessed that Joe had no plans to leave his wife because he didn't want to risk losing his wealth. She revealed that Joe believed Maria was the only obstacle to their happiness. Joe thought he couldn't be the one to make Maria disappear without arousing suspicion. However, Tanya was willing to do it, convinced that no one would look for Maria and that their love justified the actions they were considering. Tanya and Joe were arrested on February 16, 2005. Tanya confessed right away, but Joe did not. He accused Tanya of being jealous and insisted that she acted alone. Tanya pleaded guilty to causing serious injury and, without going to trial, she was sentenced to 12 years in prison, with a non-parole period of 9 years. Meanwhile, Maria remained in a coma and did not regain consciousness for several months. Joe was released on bail, and on June 9, he submitted a formal request to visit his wife in the hospital. His request was approved, but unfortunately, her health was not getting better. On July 26, the doctors concluded that keeping her on life support was no longer viable and advised discontinuing it. This decision sparked significant controversy, led to protests outside the hospital. Maria's family was heartbroken, publicly disagreed with the doctor's recommendation, but the medical advice remained unchanged. On August 5, 2005, nearly 6 months after the attack, Maria Corp passed away. Her funeral took place on August 12. On that same day, Joe made 2 phone calls, one to his ex-wife and another to a journalist, where he expressed his intention to take his own life. When emergency services arrived at his home, they found Joe in the garage, standing on a stool with a noose around his neck. Upon seeing the responders, he jumped. Unfortunately, he died at the scene. Beside him were photos of Maria, sports memorabilia, and a handwritten note in which he asserted his innocence. We will never fully know if that note was the final lie or the truth. If Joe had gone to trial, it might have been difficult to prove his guilt, but justice never had the opportunity to take its course. In 2013, several years later, Tanya, who was still in prison, asked to marry another female inmate, but her request was denied. On February 14, 2014, she was paroled after serving a little over 8 years in Dame Phyllis Frost Maximum Security Prison, and her new partner was there to greet her at the prison gates. The death of Maria Corp shocked the entire nation of Australia. Maria was a woman who dedicated her life to her family, love, and faith, yet she was betrayed by the person she trusted the most. Her death was not merely a crime, it was a tragic outcome of obsession, selfishness, and deceit. One of her attackers went to prison, while the other avoided justice by committing to end his life. However, the person who truly paid the highest price was Maria. Her voice was silenced, her future taken away, and her story remains a painful reminder of one of Australia's darkest true crime cases. A question that remains forever unanswered: is Joe Corp guilty? At 3 a.m., police knocked on the door of a quiet apartment in Houston. Inside, Leon Jacob and Valerie McDaniel thought their troubles were resolved. However, when Valerie opened the door, instead of finding relief, she was met with handcuffs. 2 people were missing, and it was believed they were dead. Now, they at the center of this situation had to confront the reality of what had happened. Unbeknownst to them, everything had been a setup. This story revolves around deception, manipulation, and a plan that spiraled out of control, ultimately leading to a dramatic downfall. Leon Jacob had always dreamed of becoming a doctor and saving lives, but the reality was much darker. His medical career was marked by unfinished residencies, disciplinary actions, and a series of failures. His personal life was equally troubled. Leon married Annie Morrison in 2001. She was ambitious, smart, but their home life was chaotic. They moved to New York to advance their careers, Annie in law and Leon in medicine, but what should have been a time for growth turned into a nightmare. Verbal abuse quickly escalated to physical violence. Leon hid his actions well, bruises were concealed and threats were spoken softly. By the time their second son was born, Annie lived in a constant state of fear. Leon's anger was uncontrollable. He drank heavily, gambled irresponsibly, and manipulated Annie through psychological abuse and terrifying threats. During one violent confrontation, he even pulled a knife on her in front of their child. On another occasion, Leon locked Annie and their baby in a room, telling her that the only way out was in a plastic bag. Annie finally spoke up. With her parents' assistance, she escaped with her children to Chicago. However, Leon did not give up. He stalked Annie and her family, expressing anger towards the court that gave her custody. Unable to control her, he shifted his attention to someone new, Megan Varikas. Megan worked at a hotel in Pittsburgh, where Leon had moved for his 6th residency. Like his previous positions, this one ended poorly due to his aggressive behavior towards staff and neglect of patient safety. Despite this, Megan was initially taken in by his charm. They relocated to Houston in late 2014, hoping for a new beginning, but Leon remained unchanged. By 2017, their relationship had deteriorated into threats, harassment, and fear. Megan faced physical abuse, constant stalking. When she attempted to leave, he followed her. When she sought refuge, he tracked her down. Even when she found safety at work, he would lurk outside, hiding in the bushes and confronting her coworkers. He bombarded her with emails filled with a mix of desperate requests and angry outbursts. He was unwilling to let her go and refused to accept her rejection. Megan applied for a restraining order and also sued Leon for harassment and assault. Facing criminal charges, Leon panicked as his dream of becoming a doctor slipped further away. Instead of accepting responsibility for his actions, Leon started to plan something more sinister. He reached out to a family connection and visited a law firm run by friends of his parents, where he met Laura, the owner's niece. Laura attempted to mediate the situation, hoping to persuade Megan to drop the charges and reconcile, but Megan refused. This rejection triggered Leon's dark thoughts. He considered that Laura helped Megan disappear. When Laura sensed his disturbing intention, she quickly distanced herself from him. Leon, feeling rejected, began sending Laura numerous messages and harassing her at her workplace. Although Laura felt unsafe, she did not report him to the police. Instead, she contacted her friend, seeking his help to intervene. Leon continued to stand his ground. A month went by without any progress. When Laura tried to reach her friend again, a stranger named Zach picked up the phone. He informed her that her friend had passed away unexpectedly. Zach, a former soldier, mentioned that he was familiar with the situation and offered his assistance. This new relationship would soon make a significant impact. Leon's personal life took an unexpected turn when he started dating Valerie McDaniel, a well-regarded veterinarian from Houston and a neighbor of his mother. Valerie, known for her compassion and passion for animals, had a successful career running the Montrose Veterinary Clinic since 2000. However, her personal life had been marked by deceit. She had previously been happily married to Mac, whom she met in college. In 2008, they adopted a baby girl after facing infertility challenges. Unfortunately, their family life fell apart when a woman unexpectedly contacted Valerie, claiming to be Mac's mistress and revealing years of his infidelity. Despite Mac's pleas for forgiveness, the cheating continued. Valerie eventually filed for divorce in 2014. After a lengthy and expensive legal battle, they finalized the divorce in 2016, which included her buying out Mac's share of the clinic for over $1 million. After becoming single and raising her daughter, Valerie decided to move to an upscale neighborhood in Houston. There, she met Leon, a charming, attractive man who was 8 years younger and worked as a doctor. At 48 years old and seeking stability, Valerie found herself attracted to him, even though she noticed some troubling signs. Not everyone supported their relationship. Friends cautioned her about Leon's arrogance. Her ex-husband Mac grew increasingly worried when he learned that Leon had been arrested for assault, especially since their daughter was now spending time at Valerie's house. This concern led to tension between Valerie and Mac. Valerie had assured Mac that Leon would not be present during their daughter's visits, but she broke that promise. Leon continued to come in Valerie's home, ignoring the warnings and boundaries set by others. As Leon's time to face her lawsuit approaches, he received a call from Zach. Leon saw this as an opportunity. Zach, who described himself as a former soldier, appeared to be the ideal person to help with what Leon considered a solution. Leon wanted Megan out of the way before the trial. If she is unwilling to leave the state on her own, it would be best for her to go back to Pittsburgh. Without hesitation, Leon offered Zach money and gave him a $2,500 down payment during a meeting in early February. However, Zach, whose real name was Modaz Azza, had no intention of harming anyone. Instead, he viewed this as a chance to prevent a potential tragedy and decided to trick Leon. He told Leon that the job was completed, claimed that Megan had been taken and convinced not to testify. Leon wanted to talk to her, but Zach advised against it, insisting she was emotionally unstable. For now, Leon accepted this and waited until Megan arrived at court. When she did, Leon lost his temper, while Zach pretended not to know what was going on. To keep up the act, Zach created a new plan. This one involved pretending to cause a car accident and planting banned substance to damage Megan's reputation before the trial. Leon agreed once more and continued to pay Zach, but the plan didn't succeed. Zach claimed that his team, whom he had supposedly hired, had been arrested. In reality, there was no team and no plan. It was all a deception. By the time Zach vanished, Leon had given him a total of $9,000. During a later court hearing, Zach admitted that he never called the police because he feared they wouldn't believe him. Given his previous theft conviction and a suspended sentence, he worried that his testimony would not be taken seriously, especially against someone like Leon Jacob, who was still a respected doctor. Feeling frustrated and betrayed, Leon looked for help elsewhere. He reached out to a prominent Houston city councilman and bail bondsman, Michael Kubosh, who had previously helped post bail for Zach. However, when Leon rushed into Michael's office demanding Zach's phone number, the discussion quickly changed direction. Leon was forceful and persistent. He accused Zach of disappearing with a large sum of money. Confused, Michael asked for more details. That's when Leon disclosed a shocking fact. He wanted Megan removed from Houston and taken off the witness list for good. Michael felt a surge of panic. He quickly reached out to the police. Authorities acted swiftly and tracked down Zach, discovering that his real name was Motaz. After his arrest, Motaz told detectives that he had been deceiving Leon to prevent a real crime from occurring. He claimed his actions were part of a scheme to protect Megan while also earning money. However, a crucial question remained: if he genuinely wanted to protect Megan, why didn't he contact the police earlier? After months of manipulation, deceit, and escalating threats, Motaz, previously known as Zach, decided to involve law enforcement. He agreed to cooperate with detectives in a high-stakes undercover operation aimed at capturing Leon Jacob in the act. The goal was to obtain recorded evidence of Leon ordering a hit. Detective Javier was selected to impersonate the hitman. During a wiretapped conversation, Zach informed Leon that he wasn't the suitable candidate for the job, but he had someone else in mind. Leon acted quickly. He was not only focused on Megan but also had another target in mind. He asked if Javier could take care of two assignments, the second being Valerie McDaniel's ex-husband, Mac. Both Leon and Valerie consented. Mac needed to be eliminated. On March 8, 2017, four individuals, Leon, Valerie, Zach, and undercover officer Javier, gathered at an Olive Garden restaurant. This meeting was intended to be a planning session, but it was actually being recorded. Leon expressed his thoughts regarding their situation. He indicated that he did not want to kill Megan but just wanted her to leave Houston and made her too scared to testify. However, he mentioned that if she refused to leave, he was open to taking extreme actions. He even suggested using an injection to make it look like she had a heart attack. Valerie, who was sitting next to him, didn't react negatively. Instead, she shared Mac's location and proposed a plan to hijack his car while he was inside, making it look like a robbery that went wrong. She was concerned that Mac would seek full custody of their daughter. Unbeknownst to the perpetrators, their intended targets were already informed about the operation. 2 weeks prior to the meeting, police warned Megan that her life was at risk. She initially sought refuge at her parents' house but later chose to return and assist with the investigation. Mac received the same warning and request for help. Together, they became part of their own crime scene. The police staged photos to create a convincing illusion. Megan was shown bound and gagged, her eyes wide with fear, while Mac was depicted with a fake gunshot wound, slumped on the ground and in his car. These images would serve as a crucial trap for Leon and Valerie. On March 9, Detective Javier showed Leon and Valerie photos of Mac's lifeless body. Leon examined the images closely, while Valerie nodded in agreement. They both looked satisfied with what they saw. Later that day, Javier presented a second set of images showing Megan, who appeared to be kidnapped and frightened. She would later share that, at that moment, while she was tied up and surrounded by officers posing for fake crime scene photos, she couldn't hold back her tears. The distinction between fiction and reality had blurred significantly. Javier informed Leon that Megan needed to be killed. Leon didn't dispute this. Then, early in the morning on March 10 at 3 a.m., police officers knocked on Valerie's door with the unfortunate news: Megan and Mac were dead. This was a test. Leon and Valerie had failed miserably. They pretended to be shocked. Leon quickly asserted that they had stayed home all night, offering an unsolicited alibi. The detectives, fully aware of the elaborate setup, observed their reaction. It was done. They had the recordings, the photos, the lies, and now they had the evidence. Leon Jacob, who was eager to restore his reputation, created a plan that ultimately led to his downfall. Valerie McDaniel, a highly regarded veterinarian, collaborated with him on a scheme that shocked even experienced investigators. Just hours after thinking their plan had worked, Leon Jacob and Valerie McDaniel were arrested. The police revealed the shocking truth: no one had died. Mac and Megan were safe, the photos were fake, and the assassination never took place. Leon went from disbelief to panic in an instant. Valerie, shocked and speechless, found herself confronted by Mac, who was waiting just outside her apartment during the arrest. She had to look into the eyes of the man she had desperately tried to forget. Meanwhile, their daughter was sleeping inside. That same night, the little girl was taken into Mac's care. It would be the last time Valerie would see her child. Leon and Valerie were both taken to jail. Because of his previous charges, Leon was not granted bail. Valerie was released to await her trial under supervision, but she would never actually appear in court. On March 27, 2017, just weeks after her arrest, Valerie McDaniel jumped from the 7th floor of her apartment building. She left behind a legacy filled with grief and confusion, as well as a voice memo on her iPad. In the memo, she expressed her apologies and emphasized that she never intended to hurt anyone. Despite the circumstances, her patients and friends remembered her fondly, as a respected veterinarian, but caring mother, a woman who ultimately lost her way and all that she had worked for. Leon was not permitted to attend her funeral. His trial began nearly a year later, in March 2018. In court, Leon's defense team attempted to place all the blame on Valerie. They portrayed him as a man struggling with untreated bipolar disorder, overwhelmed by trauma and desperation. His lawyers argued that he had long faced extreme mood swings, impulsivity, and disorganized thinking, which are symptoms of a serious mental illness. They reminded the jury of the sudden death of his father from a heart attack when Leon was just 13 years old. Leon had been alone with him at that moment and carried the guilt ever since. Leon's mother, who is a lawyer, testified that he never fully processed that trauma and remained emotionally fragile as a result. The defense argued that he wasn't evil, but rather broken. The prosecution had a different perspective. They portrayed Leon as cold, calculating. He didn't just plan a crime, he also recruited accomplices, easily told lies, paid people he believed were hitmen, even proposed using chemicals to induce heart attacks. When shown images of Megan being tied up and gagged, he didn't react or object. In fact, he seemed to approve. Megan testified about the distressing experience of being stalked and harassed by Leon, which left her feeling terrified. She called the police numerous times for help. She also provided testimony, describing the threats and emotional abuse she endured during their marriage, including a chilling remark from Leon that she would not be found if she left him. Despite the overwhelming evidence against him, Leon maintained his innocence, claiming he never intended to harm anyone and that the police had coerced him into making him sound guilty. His defense team argued that he only aimed to intimidate Megan and protect his future. However, the jury was not convinced and took just 2 hours to reach their decision. Leon Jacob was found guilty on 2 counts of solicitation of capital murder for his attempts to have Megan and Mac killed. He received a life sentence in prison and was fined $10,000, with the possibility of parole in 2047. As the verdict was revealed, a disturbing detail surfaced. Leon once mentioned to someone that this whole situation would make for an excellent movie. However, this was not a film. The consequences were real and painful. A child lost her mother, a community lost its trust, and 2 lives were nearly destroyed, all to protect a man who believed he could act without consequences. Thankfully, this time the worst outcome was averted just in time. On March 5, 2021, 30-year-old Matthew Dunmeyer left a suburban Cleveland bar and got into a white smart car driven by a woman he referred to only as an old friend. He told his group of friends that he planned to spend the weekend with her and then vanished. He never returned home the next day, ignored all calls, and his phone was found turned off. No one close to Matthew knew who this woman was, where they were headed, or why he had kept the meeting a secret. What began as a missing persons search quickly turned into a murder case. Matthew Dunmire was born on November 26, 1989, in Hudson, Ohio, to Tommy Lynn Dunmire and John Nelson McQuillan. His hometown was the picture of suburban America: well-kept homes, good schools, and a strong sense of safety. He grew up in that calm environment. From an early age, Matthew was drawn to music. His parents supported him. He started playing guitar at 6 and later learned other instruments. As a teen, he got into rock music and went to concerts with friends from elementary school. Academics weren't his strong suit. In high school, he did just enough to pass, showing little interest in schoolwork. After graduation, he chose not to go to college. Instead, he took a sales job at a local shop and stayed in town. At 20, he met a woman. A year later, they moved in together. Soon after, their son and daughter were born. Though he became a young father, those who knew him say he was a hands-on parent and a family man. He held a steady job, stayed in touch with friends, and lived an outwardly stable life. Chelsea Perkins was born the same year as Matthew and graduated from the same high school in 2009, though they weren't classmates. After earning her diploma, she joined the U.S. Coast Guard. She spent several years serving in Texas aboard a small vessel. During that time, she met her future husband. They later married and had 2 children before relocating to Virginia. After leaving military service, Chelsea began working online, creating adult content under the alias Selena Savage. She opened an account on OnlyFans and promoted it via Instagram. This work brought her a steady income comparable to what she earned in the Coast Guard. All her content was posted under her stage name, helping her maintain a boundary between her public persona and her private life. Both Matthew and Chelsea seemed to have stable lives, and their families and friends were unaware they even knew each other. Before 2021, there was no indication of a connection. Their relationship began with seemingly innocent social media messages that didn't raise any red flags. Nobody expected this online interaction to end so tragically. Friday, March 5, 2021, after work, Matthew headed to Tiki Underground, a bar he often visited with coworkers and longtime friends. That evening was no different. He had arranged to meet a few people for their usual catch-up over drinks. They started gathering around 5:30 p.m., planning to keep it short, as everyone expected to be home by dinner. As the group chatted, they talked about weekend plans. Some suggested a quick trip outdoors. Others mentioned errands or family time. When it was Matthew's turn, he said he was unavailable. He told them an old friend from Virginia had come into town and they planned to meet up and hang out. That immediately sparked curiosity. A few people started asking who this woman was, how they knew each other, and why he hadn't invited her to join them at the bar. Matthew dodged the questions. He didn't mention her name or share any details. All he said was that they were going to stay at an Airbnb outside the city and go for a walk in the park the next day. The reaction among his friends was quietly uneasy. Many were surprised he was heading out overnight with someone no one had ever heard of, especially since he was in a relationship and living with the mother of his children. Several of those at the table had known him since school and couldn't recall him ever mentioning any friend from Virginia. His behavior didn't seem like him. Usually, he was open about his plans and personal life. At one point, Matthew received a message on his phone. He read it, stood up, and said his ride was about to arrive. One of his coworkers, who happened to be his direct supervisor, offered to walk him to the parking lot. He later admitted he was just curious and wanted to see this mysterious companion. By then, it was already dark. Matthew approached a white car parked a short distance from the entrance. From the shape, it looked like a smart car. A dark-haired woman was in the driver's seat. Because of the lighting and distance, her face wasn't clearly visible. The supervisor said goodbye to Matthew and went back inside, telling the others what he'd seen. Matthew's exit left the group with an odd feeling. The conversation continued, but the mood had shifted. Some started speculating about a possible affair. Others were simply puzzled by the secrecy. None of them imagined they were seeing him for the last time. On the morning of March 6, 2021, Matthew's loved ones weren't initially worried. He had said he would be home that evening. However, as the day went on and he couldn't be reached, concerns grew. His calls went straight to voicemail, and his phone was off. By 8 p.m., his partner started calling his friends. Several friends said they had seen Matthew the night before at Tiki Underground. He left with a woman in a white smart car. No one knew the woman, her name, or where they were going. This secrecy increased the worry. Matthew had clearly kept the details of his meeting private, even from close friends. His partner had tried contacting him every way possible, but received no response. The last message he sent was at 10:49 p.m. the previous night. Since then, his phone was off, and there had been no calls or texts. It had been over 24 hours since he left, and it was unusual for Matthew to disappear without any explanation. Late that night, on March 6th, Matthew's parents went to the police station and reported him missing. His mother insisted that he wouldn't have left on his own. She said it was completely out of character for him to disappear without contacting his children or his partner of many years. The family emphasized that he had never done anything like this before. The officers took the report seriously. Although Matthew was legally an adult, the details described raised enough concern for law enforcement to begin a preliminary search. Within hours, they started checking local hospitals, detention centers, nearby hotels, and accident reports. But nothing came up. Without access to Matthew's phone data, investigators had limited tools at their disposal. No one knew where he planned to spend the night. He hadn't mentioned the name or location of the Airbnb. The identity of the woman he met remained unknown. The only lead they had was that she had been driving a white smart car. That information wasn't enough to launch a broader search outside city limits. Efforts to find Matthew have led nowhere. He wasn't at any friend's house, hadn't shown up at work, and wasn't listed among patients at local medical facilities. None of the regional incident reports matched his description. Officers continued questioning relatives and co-workers, hoping to identify any possible travel routes. At the same time, detectives requested footage from nearby security cameras around the bar where he had last been seen. By late evening on March 6th, the situation officially shifted from a temporary absence to a missing person case. Nearly 24 hours had passed since anyone had last heard from Matthew, and there had been no new messages or contact. The case was given high priority. At this point, Matthew's family and friends began to understand that this wasn't just a delay or a personal issue. It could be something much more serious. On the morning of March 9, 2021, the Valley View Police Department received an urgent call reporting the discovery of a man's body by a group of hikers in Cuyahoga Valley National Park. The body was located just off a hiking trail, only a few yards from the path, in an area easily accessible yet concealed from the road by trees and brush. The park, situated on the border of two counties and intersected by several highways, is accessible from multiple directions. Officers arrived on the scene within minutes and quickly secured the area around the body. The man was dressed in dark clothing, including a leather jacket, hooded sweatshirt, fingerless gloves, dark jeans, and boots. A half-full plastic Aquafina water bottle was found nearby on the ground. No identification or phone was found in his pockets. Preliminary examination suggested the individual had been deceased for at least 2 days. There were no signs of a struggle or that the body had been dragged. The undisturbed, supine position suggested the event occurred at that location. A gunshot wound was discovered at the back of the head. The bullet's trajectory, descending from top to bottom, indicated the man was likely sitting when the shot was fired, suggesting the shooter was in close proximity. The body was transported to the morgue for a forensic autopsy, while investigators began reviewing missing person reports from the surrounding area. Upon learning of the discovery, the police traveled to the scene to compare notes. The following day, the coroner identified the deceased as Matthew Dunmeyer, who had disappeared 4 days prior. His identity was confirmed through fingerprint analysis and a tattoo on his arm, matching the description provided by his family. His loved ones were notified of his death. The official cause of death was determined to be a gunshot wound to the head. With this confirmation, the case was reclassified as a criminal investigation. Now that the victim was identified, detectives focused on their only concrete lead, Matthew's co-worker's statement regarding the white smart car Matthew was seen entering on March 5. One witness, who walked him to the parking lot, recalled that the driver was a dark-haired woman. He could not recall the license plate number and, due to the darkness, had not gotten a clear view of her face. The investigation began with a review of surveillance footage from the area around the bar. While the Tiki Underground parking lot lacked cameras, a nearby traffic camera near the highway exit had recorded a white smart car heading in the direction of Hudson at 5:46 p.m., approximately 15 minutes before Matthew arrived at the bar. This corroborated the car's direction of travel. The next key location on the timeline was a gas station where, at 6:15 p.m., security footage captured the same white smart car. Matthew was seen exiting the vehicle, entering the store, and purchasing a bottle of water, a can of soda, and a pack of cigarettes, the same Aquafina bottle later found near his body. This stop allowed investigators to establish a continuous timeline of the evening's events. Further review of traffic cameras and roadway sensor data revealed the smart car traveled north towards Cleveland. Utilizing toll records and sensor pings, investigators were able to precisely map the vehicle's route. The vehicle arrived at a property rented through Airbnb on Ashbury Avenue, located in the eastern part of Cleveland. Police spoke with the property owner and showed him a photograph of Matthew. He confirmed that Matthew had stayed there for one night. Staff who serviced the home recalled that Matthew had arrived with a dark-haired woman. Following an official request to Airbnb, investigators received the booking information. The reservation had been made under the name Chelsea Perkins. A background check confirmed that Chelsea and Matthew had attended the same high school, though they had not maintained contact in recent years. None of Matthew's family or friends had ever heard of her. He hadn't disclosed to anyone his plans for the weekend. With her identity confirmed, police began gathering details about Chelsea and her current residence. Utilizing surveillance footage, toll booth records, phone GPS logs, and Airbnb registration data, investigators reconstructed a clear timeline of the meeting between Matthew and Chelsea. On March 5, around 6:30 p.m., they arrived at a rented house on Ashbury Avenue in Cleveland. The rental had been booked for one night under Chelsea's name. According to house staff, the two arrived in a white smart car and entered the property together. Nearby surveillance footage confirmed that the vehicle remained parked outside the house throughout the night, and no activity was recorded around the property until morning. At 8:37 a.m. on March 6, both Chelsea's and Matthew's phones began moving. GPS data indicated they had left Cleveland and were heading toward Cuyahoga Valley National Park. By 9:45 a.m., both phones had connected to a cell tower located near the park's southern entrance, which aligned with the previously tracked route captured by traffic cameras. The site where Matthew's body was later discovered was within walking distance of that signal location. GPS data further indicated the vehicle stopped in a nearby parking area, and both phones remained stationary for a period shortly afterward. At 10:49 a.m., Matthew sent a final text to his partner, informing her that he planned to be home later that evening. That message was the last recorded activity from his phone. Roughly 30 minutes later, the signal disappeared, and no further calls or texts were made. The phone was either shut off or switched to airplane mode. Chelsea's device, however, remained active. Forensic analysis of a water bottle found near Matthew's body revealed two DNA profiles, his and Chelsea's. This discovery constituted the first concrete evidence placing Chelsea at the scene of the crime. Further forensic testing, including debris found under Matthew's fingernails and hair strands recovered from his clothing, also matched Chelsea Perkins's genetic profile. These results left little doubt that she had been the last person to see him alive. Following the discovery of Matthew's body, police continued to track Chelsea's vehicle. Toll road records logged her white smart car exiting Ohio around 1 p.m. on March 6, heading north. The next confirmed sighting of the car was near Toledo before it crossed into Michigan. That evening, surveillance cameras captured the car pulling into the parking lot of a local tattoo parlor. According to staff at the studio, a dark-haired woman arrived alone, presented an ID bearing the name Chelsea Perkins, and scheduled a service. She remained in the shop for several hours, during which she received a new tattoo. The employees noted no signs of stress or unusual behavior. She paid in cash and left afterward. Later that day, Chelsea posted a photo to her personal Instagram page, standing in front of a mirror at the tattoo parlor. The image showcased the fresh tattoo with a caption that read, "What an amazing weekend." Geolocational data confirmed that the post had been made from within Michigan. There was no mention or indication of what had transpired earlier that morning. On March 7th, surveillance cameras tracked Chelsea's car traveling southeast toward Virginia. She returned to her residence in Arlington and resumed her routine. There were no signs that she felt pressured or was attempting to hide. Over the following weeks, she remained active on social media, sharing everyday posts with no reference to the events in Ohio. On March 30th, 2021, police got a warrant to search Chelsea Perkins's home in Arlington, Virginia. This was more than 3 weeks after Matthew Dunmire died. Investigators had good reason to get the warrant because they had found Chelsea was with Matthew at the park. There was physical evidence connecting her to the scene. They found records of their travel route. They had a shared Airbnb reservation, and surveillance and phone records confirmed their connection. On the day of the search, FBI agents arrived at Chelsea's residence. Chelsea herself answered the door and cooperated without resistance. During her interaction with the federal team, she expressed surprise at their visit and declined to answer any questions without an attorney present. During the search, officers discovered a 9mm semi-automatic handgun, legally registered in Chelsea's name. Forensic testing later confirmed that this weapon was used in the fatal shooting that resulted in Matthew's death. Investigators also seized electronic devices, documents, personal belongings, clothing, and accessories consistent with surveillance footage from Cleveland and the national park. With the combined DNA evidence found on the water bottle and under the victim's fingernails, law enforcement had assembled a solid case. Despite the mounting evidence, Chelsea was not immediately taken into custody. In the months following Matthew's death, she remained in Virginia, maintained a public presence, and showed no visible signs of distress. This inaction by the authorities deeply frustrated Matthew's family. His mother, Tommy, was particularly devastated, unable to accept that the primary suspect in her son's case remained free. In her view, the justice system had failed. Letters and appeals to detectives and the prosecutor yielded no clear response, and neither she nor her husband received a timeline for a possible arrest. Officials cited procedural requirements as the reason for the delay. The ongoing situation took a severe toll on Tommy's mental health. Sleepless nights were spent at her computer, obsessively gathering information about Chelsea. She tracked Chelsea's social media activity, noted addresses, and searched for travel records. This obsession unfolded alongside her intense grief. Over time, that grief hardened into a desperate determination. If the system couldn't deliver justice, she would pursue it herself. In the fall of 2021, Tommy convinced her husband, John, to help with her scheme. They bought 2 UPS uniforms online, rented a car, and created fake delivery packages. Their plan was to pose as delivery drivers to get onto private property. Tommy thought Chelsea lived in Washington, D.C., and that's where they were headed, but she was wrong. Chelsea actually lived in Arlington, Virginia. In November, the Dunmires put their plan into motion. They drove to the address they believed belonged to Chelsea. John waited in a car while Tommy, dressed in a UPS uniform and carrying a package, approached the front door. A woman opened the door, unsuspecting due to the delivery outfit. Tommy then pulled a handgun from under her jacket and fired twice at the woman's midsection. The woman collapsed. Almost immediately, Tommy realized her terrible mistake. The victim had no connection to the case. She didn't know Matthew or Chelsea. Authorities never released her name, but confirmed that she survived after emergency surgery. In a panic, Tommy attempted to flee. Neighbors who heard the gunshots called emergency services. Patrol units arrived within minutes and spotted Tommy walking away not far from the scene. Seeing them, she turned the gun on herself and ended her life with a shot to the head. She was 57 years old. Her husband, John, was arrested at the scene, having remained in a car and made no attempt to escape. He was later charged with being an accessory to attempted murder and conspiracy to commit a criminal act, claiming during questioning that he acted under his wife's pressure and was unable to stop her. The aftermath shattered the family. Matthew's children were now without a father or grandmother. The public outcry increased pressure on investigators, but Chelsea remained free. Tommy never lived to see an arrest. Her tragic decision was seen by many as a devastating consequence of what the family perceived as an unbearable delay in justice. It wasn't until December 9, 2021, 9 months after Matthew's death, that Chelsea Perkins was officially arrested at her registered address. Chelsea remained calm during the arrest and declined to give a statement. She was charged with first-degree murder. The court refused to release Chelsea on bail before her trial. This decision was based on the seriousness of the crime she's accused of, the strong evidence against her, and the possibility she might try to run away. Chelsea was kept in jail while awaiting trial. Her lawyers asked the court to reconsider the bail conditions, but the court stood by its initial decision. Prosecutors presented their case for trial. They provided a detailed indictment with supporting evidence, including witness statements, ballistics analysis, surveillance video, text message logs, Airbnb booking confirmations, and a timeline of Chelsea's digital activity. Between 2022 and 2025, the legal proceedings continued. Chelsea's attorneys maintained her innocence, arguing that the evidence was insufficient. Throughout this time, Chelsea denied any involvement in Matthew's death. Her stance remained unchanged until May 2025, more than 4 years after Matthew's death. She agreed to a plea deal and pleaded guilty to the killing. Under the terms of the agreement, she was offered a sentencing range of 27 to 31 years, with time already served in pretrial detention counting towards the total sentence. The exact length of her incarceration was to be determined later. In exchange, Chelsea provided a statement explaining her actions. According to her, the motive was revenge. She claimed that in 2017, during a party in their hometown, Matthew had committed an act of aggression against her. She reported the incident to local police, but the case went nowhere due to a lack of evidence. The charges were dismissed, and Matthew faced no legal consequences. Chelsea stated that years later, she came across his profile on social media by chance and decided to reach out under the pretense of reconnecting. In reality, she claimed her plan to confront and kill him was already in motion. She explained that she arranged the Airbnb, invited him to meet, and carried out the act, using a tattoo appointment as a cover story. Investigators were unable to verify her claims. Archived records did show a police report filed in 2017 in the same jurisdiction, but the case had been closed within 3 weeks due to insufficient grounds for criminal prosecution. No direct evidence of wrongdoing on Matthew's part was ever established. Matthew's family and friends rejected Chelsea's version of events, firmly believing he was incapable of such behavior. However, prosecutors did not formally challenge her account, as the main person involved was no longer alive to defend himself. The court acknowledged that the guilty plea avoided a lengthy jury trial. Chelsea Perkins faces 20 to 25 years in prison when she is sentenced on September 9, 2025. The motive behind the crime was never confirmed through independent evidence. Chelsea's statement remained the only account of what led to the act. Public opinion remained sharply divided. Some viewed her as someone who sought personal revenge for a past injustice, while others saw the crime as a calculated killing with no substantiated cause. No conclusion fully satisfied both sides. It was early Saturday morning in Miami-Dade County. The streets were still quiet when a neighbor spotted something strange in a parking lot, a little girl walking alone. She was barefoot, crying, and covered in blood. She looked scared and confused, too young to explain what had happened. Maria Camila Garcia Molina was born in Colombia. Seeking opportunity and stability, she and her mother, Adalgisa Molina, immigrated to the United States and settled in Miami-Dade County, Florida, where some of their family already lived. There, Maria quietly and determinedly began to build her life. People who knew her described her as intelligent and composed. She was devoted to her loved ones, and she possessed a maturity beyond her age. Maria initially worked in a dental office to gain experience and support herself. She then became an independent nail technician. Although the work was hard, Maria viewed it as a way to achieve her dream life. By 2020, her hard work had allowed her to save enough money to buy a small, safe, and peaceful two-bedroom apartment in Southwest Miami for herself and her mother. People who knew her remember her warmth and ability to make others feel seen. A coworker recalled that even when Maria was struggling, she always prioritized others. During this chapter of newfound stability and transformation, Maria fell in love. The relationship would bring her the greatest blessing of her life, her daughter. Becoming a mother changed everything. Though the relationship with the child's father eventually ended in disappointment, Maria faced that emotional setback with strength and resilience. Her daughter became her anchor, her greatest motivation, and the source of a renewed sense of direction. Maria wasn't one to party or socialize excessively. She didn't drink or use banned substance. Instead, she focused on her responsibilities, balancing work and motherhood. Home and work became her entire world. Within that space, she created a steady rhythm, prioritizing her daughter's well-being above all else. Then, in mid-2024, she met a man named Joy Chandranath through a popular social media platform. About 5 years her senior, Joy worked in technical support for a logistics company. In his spare time, he was heavily invested in physical training, a passion he frequently shared online, attracting a sizable following and eventually earning him the informal title of influencer. Initially, Joy presented himself as thoughtful and attentive. Still recovering from a previous breakup, Maria found this newfound attention reassuring. He regularly complimented her, expressed interest in her, and even began learning Spanish to connect with her on a deeper level. He encouraged her ambitions and frequently spoke about the future, his words brimming with promises and shared goals. Despite warnings from her mother, the relationship progressed quickly. Having seen her daughter hurt before, Adalgisa worried history might repeat itself. Though she voiced her concerns, Maria, ever hopeful, felt compelled to follow her heart. After all, Joy seemed so different from her past partners, supportive, respectful, and driven. In her eyes, it was a new beginning, full of potential. In the early stages of their relationship, Joy appeared to embody the qualities of a modern. His social media platforms often featured motivational captions and short videos in which he spoke about values like respect, emotional growth, and treating women right. For a while, Maria believed in this carefully constructed image. However, the facade began to crumble. Within just a few months, alarming changes had crept into their relationship. Joy grew increasingly controlling. His once charming curiosity morphed into obsessive surveillance. He demanded to know Maria's whereabouts at all times, who she was speaking to, what she was wearing, and how long she would be out. When she didn't reply to his messages promptly, he would flood her phone with texts. Initially, Maria tried to rationalize his behavior. She told a close friend that he was simply dealing with insecurities, she brushing aside the red flags, convinced that he meant well and only needed reassurance. But deep down, reality was beginning to weigh heavily on her. The warmth that had once defined their connection had cooled, and the once promising future had begun to blur, like a mirage vanishing under intense scrutiny. The charming man she had met no longer existed. In his place was someone demanding, possessive, and increasingly unpredictable. By November 2024, after 5 months of emotional strain, Maria made the difficult decision to end the relationship. It was not easy, especially with a 3-year-old daughter to consider, but she believed it was the right thing to do. She was ready to reclaim her peace and focus once again on the life she had worked so hard to build. Little did she know that this act would become the catalyst for an unimaginable tragedy. The morning of Saturday, April 26, 2025, began like any other. As the first light crept across the Miami-Dade County skyline, Maria left her apartment with her daughter. It was early, quiet. Around 7 a.m., a neighbor in a nearby residential complex noticed a small child wandering through the parking lot. The sight stopped them in their tracks. The little girl was barefoot, disoriented, and visibly distressed. Her tiny body was smeared with blood. Her hands were outstretched, her cheeks streaked with tears, and her face marked by pure terror. She cried out, wordlessly expressing her fear in every movement. Then came the shocking realization: this child was the granddaughter of Adalgisa, a woman who lived in the Twin Lakes complex. The neighbors scooped her up and rushed her to Adalgisa's home. When Adalgisa saw her granddaughter at the door, her heart sank. The child was trembling, her pajamas soaked in blood. She couldn't say much, but her appearance spoke volumes. Desperate to ensure the girl wasn't physically harmed, Adalgisa quickly inspected her. Mercifully, the blood wasn't hers, but that realization only deepened Adalgisa's dread. If the girl was unharmed, whose blood had covered her? Panic rising, Adalgisa began frantically searching for Maria. But as she searched, her daughter was nowhere to be found. The minutes stretched endlessly. Finally, she saw a police officer patrolling nearby. Waving him down, she explained the urgency of the situation. Her daughter was missing, and her granddaughter had turned up alone, covered in blood. After receiving the distressing account from Adalgisa and seeing the child's state, the responding officer immediately called for backup. While the full scope of the situation was not yet known, the Vulnerable Victims Unit was activated, and an initial investigation was launched, initially looking into possible child neglect simply because the child had been found alone, bloodied, and terrified. Officers knew something was wrong, but they did not yet know how wrong. Police cars were sent to the family's home and neighborhood. Officers searched the streets for any sign of Maria. Soon, the family's and investigators' worst fears came true. Just a few blocks from Maria's apartment building, officers found a silver car that looked suspicious. It was parked on the side of the road, but something seemed wrong, especially after they saw reddish stains on the front passenger seat. The case was no longer just about a missing person, it was now a potential crime scene. The car doors were forced open, revealing a horrifying scene. Maria Camila's lifeless body was in the back seat, covered by a cloth. She was only 24 years old. Paramedics arrived and pronounced her dead at 6:25 p.m. The initial examination showed she had been stabbed multiple times in a brutal and frenzied attack, with wounds on her neck, arms, and torso. She had been trapped and defenseless in the car during her final moments. Crime scene tape was put up, and forensic teams began their work. News of the young woman's murder quickly spread, shocking the community. Residents came out of their homes in disbelief, watching as police officers marked evidence and the media arrived. One resident, visibly upset, told reporters that she had seen the car from her window for hours but had no idea what it contained. Before Maria's death, she had been living in fear for weeks. Even before the official investigation, her mother, Adalgisa, suspected who might be responsible. Her suspicions were confirmed when detectives interviewed Maria's young daughter. The daughter, despite her age, provided crucial information. She told investigators that a man named Joy had hit her mother on the head. This statement, along with other evidence, focused the investigation on Joy Chandranath, a man Maria Camila had once trusted but later left. It quickly became clear that Joy was not handling the breakup well. After their relationship ended, he started appearing unexpectedly at Maria's locations. Sometimes he brought gifts like flowers and chocolates. Other times, he was seen waiting in parking lots. Court records show that one day, Maria Camila saw him near her car after work. When she texted him to ask why he was there, he gave a vague answer about leaving her a surprise. She then discovered an Apple AirTag hidden on her car, which was obviously meant to track her. This discovery horrified her. By early 2024, the harassment against Maria had become so severe that she reported it to the police. She filed a complaint, fearing Joy's behavior would escalate to violence. A temporary restraining order was issued. However, Joy violated the order. On January 21st, Maria saw Joy following her while she was walking with her daughter, and she quickly left the area. The day before, January 20th, Joy had allegedly approached her in a store parking lot, claiming it was a chance encounter. Then, on January 29th, Maria's grandmother and uncle were walking the family dog when it suddenly lunged at someone hiding near the trash cans behind a neighbor's house. That person was Joy. When questioned, he said he was bringing food to Maria and her daughter. On February 28th, the temporary restraining order was lifted. Local news reports claimed this was because Maria didn't attend the next court hearing. However, her mother said the court refused to extend the order because there wasn't enough evidence to justify keeping it in place. Whatever the reason, the dismissal removed the sole legal obstacle separating Maria from a man who was becoming increasingly obsessed with her. The situation worsened the Friday before the murder when Joy confronted Maria and her new partner at a local mall. Authorities believe this confrontation increased tensions and sped up the events leading to the violence. This tragic case follows a familiar pattern. Warning signs were ignored, the legal system was overwhelmed, and the victim's pleas for help went unanswered. Maria had recognized the danger and sought protection for herself and her child, but ultimately, she couldn't prevent the tragedy. Adalgisa recalls that while she never saw any physical harm inflicted on her daughter, she did notice significant changes in her behavior after Maria spent time with Joy. Maria, who was once energetic and lively, became emotionally exhausted and withdrawn. This change was too noticeable to disregard. Adalgisa vividly remembers a specific phone call between Maria and Joy, which Maria had put on speakerphone. Adalgisa heard loud, angry shouting. Immediately after the call, she asked her daughter why she would tolerate being spoken to in such a way. This incident highlighted that something was seriously wrong in the relationship. Despite these warning signs, Adalgisa was unprepared for what ultimately happened. She told reporters that she never imagined such a tragedy could happen to her family. She said that while femicides, abuse, and domestic violence are common news stories, she never thought it would affect her daughter. The investigation uncovered a key detail that made the case more complex. Joy had a criminal record. He was out on bail for grand theft, identity fraud, and other serious crimes when the murder occurred. This contradicts his seemingly innocent online persona and raises concerns about how the system failed to protect Maria. This case immediately sparked public outrage and debate. People questioned how someone with a documented history of harassment was able to get so close to his former partner. They wondered why her previous police report wasn't taken more seriously, and why she wasn't given any additional protection after her restraining order ran out. Adding to the horror, Maria's young daughter was deeply affected by this violent act. She not only saw her mother's last moments, but she was also left alone, crying, covered in blood, and traumatized. After the tragic loss of Maria, the Garcia family faced the overwhelming task of rebuilding their lives while simultaneously arranging her funeral. To help cover the funeral costs, they started an online fundraising campaign. In the campaign description, Adalgisa expressed the injustice of her daughter's untimely death and shared that her grief was now felt by thousands of people nationwide who had been following the case. Meanwhile, law enforcement continued their investigation. Forensic teams processed the crime scene, analysts scrutinized phone records, data, and surveillance footage. In the early hours of Sunday, April 27th, investigators noticed a black car circling the area where Maria's body was discovered. The car's headlights were off. Officers stopped the vehicle and identified the driver as Joy. They observed that Joy had fresh scratches and bruises on his arms, face, and neck, suggesting a recent struggle. When questioned about his presence near the active crime scene late at night, Joy then waived his right to a lawyer and gave a recorded statement. In his statement, Joy claimed he had met Maria and her daughter for breakfast on the day of the murder. He stated the meeting was friendly and that they discussed ending their relationship amicably. He said Maria gave him some of her belongings before they separated. Later, He received a call from a relative asking about Maria, which caused him to check on her. However, the evidence contradicted Joy's account. Inside Joy's vehicle, investigators discovered Maria's personal items, her purse, her cell phone, and various forms of identification. Digital forensics added more damning proof. Data from her cell phone showed a travel pattern that mirrored Joy's movements from her home to his residence and then back to the area where her body was ultimately found. On April 28, 2025, Joy Chandranath, then 29 years old, was formally charged with second-degree murder and child abuse. His first court appearance was brief but significant. The judge denied him bail, citing the severity of the crime and the mounting evidence. Local journalists reported that members of Joy's family were present during the hearing but declined to speak to the media. As for Maria, her final farewell was held on Thursday, May 1st. Family, friends, and neighbors gathered to honor a life that had been unjustly cut short. The following day, on Friday, May 2nd, she was laid to rest, leaving behind not just memories and sorrow. As of today, no further updates have been released regarding the court proceedings. The public waits for justice, and the Garcia family continues to live with a void that will never truly be filled. Joy Chandranath is being held at Turner Guilford Night Correctional Center. Maria Camila Garcia Molina's life was tragically cut short, leaving behind a grieving family and a community shaken by the brutality of her death. Her daughter, now without a mother, faces a future marked by the trauma of that fateful day. As Joy Chandranath awaits trial at Turner Guilford Night Correctional Center, charged with second-degree murder and child abuse, the public demands accountability for a system that failed to protect a young woman who sought help. This case serves as a somber reminder of the urgent need to address domestic violence and support survivors. The fight for justice for Maria continues, as does the call to prevent such tragedies in the future.